Welcome back to the home studio and welcome to episode number 23 of the Stevie Richards Show. Today we are going to talk about WWE buying WCW and then, I'm using air quotes if you're listening, the invasion, the ultra failed invasion of WCW into the company that actually purchased them. Who would win? Who would know? Vince McMahon versus WCW. My God, it's a toss-up. Here to do the tiebreaker on that very difficult decision, that choice, is my co-host James, who is still traumatized from the first open that I did, and I used invasion in totally the wrong way.
Yeah, you threatened to invade me, dude.
That didn't sound like I was watching Oz the other day. Just yeah, the prison show.
One.
Sorry about that.
It was pretty good. That I watched the first series. And I couldn't
there's
get the
lots
rest
of invasion in that show.
Yeah. It's weird because I really, really love Law and Order Special Victims Unit, and so many of the actors in that are also in SVU, including J.K. Simmons in the early episodes, B.D. Wong, Chris Maloney. Yeah, he's one of the main dudes.
The guy from the Allstate commercials too was in that. He's also in John Wick as the assistant of the mafia guy.
I'm gonna
forget his name.
Upset you now.
He's got kind of like flaky hair up there, slightly going bald.
I've never seen John Wick.
You've never seen John? Oh my God! Somebody get this guy a Blu-ray, DVD, or a site to stream it. John Wick.
I'll watch it. I promise I'll watch it.
The first one is definitely the best one. Sounds like the kind of film I'd
actually enjoy.
The first one's the perfect balance of everything with that. Welcome to the Stevie Richards Show, where we review movies that have nothing to do about profession. Thank God we have a life outside of this somewhat. But lots of people. You think, my guess would be it's kind of like Supernatural and The Boys. The showrunner for Supernatural is also the showrunner for The Boys. So that showrunner for Oz might be also having something to do with the production. It has to be. Why would you get so many actors from one to the other? It's just, not just a coincidence.
Oh, well, Law and Order's famous for running out of actors and just reusing them anyway, and just a completely different role. Oh, 3 years have passed, no one will remember you. And then they just get the same actor in to be like a different kind of, it'll be a cop in one, then it'll be a grieving father in the next, then it'll be a rapist in the third. Yeah. It's all good anyway.
Robin Williams was crazy in that. He did a great performance in one of the special victims unit episodes. Yeah, he can play. Well, 1 hour photo, I believe that was.
I was going to say, have you seen 1 hour photo? I watched that once, and that was a great film, but I couldn't watch it a second time.
That's what I wish wrestling would understand, that a formula like Law and Order, which has been on the air for 5,200 years right now at this point. More 1,500,000 seasons, but the formula is the same. It's almost like when you turn it on, it's almost like white noise. When the opening is the crime, then it goes to the thing, then it comes back, then they're recapping it. Like the formula works no matter what, and the same thing with pro wrestling. Memphis was famous for that formula that would always work each and every week and draw business on the house shows. It's not rocket science. It really isn't. We make it sound that way because we need to still get people to watch the show like we're experts.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
You clearly are. Don't give me that.
Yeah, look at how far that's got me.
A fine YouTube channel is where it's got you, if nothing else. Right, we'll do the intro very quickly. Fitness channel. Stevie's got a fitness channel. Please go over there, subscribe and watch. Plenty of new stuff is going there in the future as well, and plenty in the archives. And most importantly of all, the Patreon. We just recorded a Patreon video rewatching Kronik versus Undertaker and Kane, the Brothers of Destruction, from Unforgiven pay-per-view 2001. Pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised, depending on how you look at it. I think it's got far too... We're going to talk about it later on in this episode. This is why we watched it for the Patreon. Nowhere near as bad as I remember it being.
No, and another match that probably gets way too much hate is the one we are going to talk about and actually do a Smartport segment, correct? Booker T versus Bagwell.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Hey, before we get started, that channel is still up there in limbo. It may become a gaming channel, but I want to do something really quick right now.
This is the analysis channel, not the fitness channel.
The analysis channel, your favorite channel with the cutoff of the word. Oh, yeah. I do want to make you jealous and also make you angry at the same time early on. I'm taking a chance. I don't want to do it, but hold on.
You sent me this a couple of days ago. So, you've got an Xbox. Is this for the flight? Is this for Microsoft Flight Simulator?
Yeah, this is for Xbox Series X or even PC. I cannot use it on my Mac, which I used to use it for X-Plane all the time. I am a big simulation fan. I haven't done the flying stuff in a while, but one of the things I used to do, this is how much of a nerd I was and probably still am, when I would come home from the road with WWE, it was all throughout my WWE years, I would recreate the flight, either going on the road or coming home. So if I had a red-eye flight from Seattle, San Francisco, back to Connecticut, I would do that flight and fly that flight in real time. I am a very boring person. I did not have a girlfriend at the time, so that probably proved 6-hour flight after taking a 6-hour flight.
I missed the single days, trust me. Do you know what I bought the other week? Planet Zoo. And then I like every 2 or 3 years, I'll buy like City Skylines or Planet Zoo or it's not 2 Point Hospital, because I loved Theme Hospital and Theme Park back in the 90s and 2000s and whenever they came out. I played them for years. And then I sit down there, spend like 3 hours trying to learn the controls, because I'll only do it on console, I won't do it on PC. And then, Civilization's another one. Civilization 6,
These all
I
play
bought
great
once.
on the Steam Deck, by the way. These all play great on the Steam Deck.
I'm sure they do, if you've got the time to learn the controls. And then I'll leave it, and then I'll try again in a year, and then I'll have forgotten all the controls, and then I can't be bothered to then spend 3 hours remembering what the controls were. And all I do is just donate money to Sony, or whoever it is that's published these things. I will play them once, and I'll never play them again. And I walk into this trap constantly.
You might as well buy WCW if you're going to really waste your money like Vince
I
did.
probably have.
Hey, I want to say this too. So you say you like the single life better, you miss it. I do not miss it at all. You know why? Because my wife will come home, and instead of saying, did you do the dishes? Did you do this? Did you do that? She goes, did you make sure to play a game with my buddy Justin? My buddy Justin and I play college football right now. Now she's telling me, did you take the flight yoke out? Did you start flying? Did you do this? Did you do... So my wife pressures me to disconnect from all this, because if people don't know by this point, which you and Chris know, I'm slightly obsessive when it comes to the production about doing all this stuff and everything, which is great, but it's difficult to shut it off. So the gaming channel might have a flight yoke review. I still have the wrestling games. I have other stuff coming. The giveaways are still going to come on the behind the scenes stuff, which we'll have coming up soon. And maybe if we make enough money and we get enough views, we can buy a wrestling company like Vince did. I keep trying to segue it back, but I keep going off on different tangents.
Hey, Ring of Honor might be up for sale at some point soon.
Dude, he bought it for $40 million. I don't know if I can...
Now, $40 million was the number that came out. I think Tony Khan refuted that and said it was more like 4.
Well, when you look at it, Vince McMahon bought everything. Talking about the tape library, the rings, the aprons, every asset from WCW for just about $4 million, correct?
$2.5 million and about 1.8 legal fees, so 4.3 all in.
ECW was somewhere between 2 to 3 million, right?
I think ultimately Vince may have spent more money buying ECW than WCW.
Wow, that's a great little factor. We'll have to check on that. Maybe Chris can put something in the little pop-up fact on that or something. Not the ticker. I know there's a lot of rendering, but the pop-up fact, see if we can do a live correction. But essentially for under $10 million or so, Vince McMahon bought 2 entire tape libraries, every asset, and also some of the talent contracts came over with that in WCW. I think that would probably be a good place to start. What do you think? Like, we had people coming over, but then the holdouts and the reasons why those people held out would probably be an interesting fact that people don't know about. What do you think? Do we go the day WWF bought WCW and lump that in there, or do you think we go right into that?
No, we can lump it in there. I'll give you a bit of a preamble. I'm sure most people know most of the facts, if not all of the facts, if you've been following wrestling for a while. If not, I'm going to give them to you anyway. You were at the WWF Raw's War 26th of March 2001, where the simulcast occurs between WWF Raw's War and WCW Nitro. Vince McMahon and the WWF announced excuse me, the purchase of WCW, which they would buy, once again, as I said before, $2.5 million plus something like $1.8 million in legal fees. The purchase was made official 3 days earlier. The Monday Night Wars were long since won, and WCW was putting out the most horrendous programming. In 2001, it actually got a tiny bit better, but 2000 was just... And I watched it every week, because at the time, I didn't have Sky Sports. I had basic cable, and there was also Worldwide that aired on what we would call terrestrial, what is your version of network television, like, Fox, NBC kind of thing. And yeah, I watched it every single week. It was god-awful stuff. That being said, WCW in 2000 had lost over $60 million on paper. 2001, they were on form for losing around $80 million if they hadn't been bought out in March. The AOL Time Warner merger, which would end up being an infinitely greater financial disaster, saw Ted Turner lose all of his controlling power and voting power in the company. I think he was left with like 3% of the company. And
he was the only thing that kept WCW alive, because everybody didn't want wrestling, and he wanted wrestling since the TBS days in Georgia Championship. He was always a wrestling fan, so he was fighting an uphill battle, and when he got his controlling interest sold or taken away, it was the beginning of the end right there.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk very briefly about why some guys... Do you know the answer of why some guys came over and some guys didn't?
Well, I would guess that it was just because different contracts, guarantees. Some guys, I would say, felt like they had something to prove. I think DDP was one guy that took pennies on the dollar to go to basically take that chance, which we saw it initially worked out for him, which it didn't. Took that chance to maybe get the opportunity. Vince McMahon always says, when you signed with the company, we're not giving guarantees, we're giving opportunities. And he figured he could become a mainstream star more than he ever could in WCW. That's my guess. A lot of guys might have been a little bit of marks for it, where the dream is always for a young aspiring wrestling fan that becomes a wrestler to always go to WWF, WWE, be like Hulk Hogan, Randy said. These are the casual fan, mainstream names over the decades that people in my generation always wanted to be at least somewhere close to when they got into the business. So that would be my educated guess is, guys like Goldberg sat out, and then we'll get to the Sting one, because his reason might have been initially financial, but it was more creative when certain things had happened on WWE programming. They said, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not going anywhere near that place. I think somewhere sandwiched in between, if you know the details, because you just interviewed him, everybody check it out on WSI, Eric Bischoff was this close to closing that deal and buying WCW, but there was no TV deal. Did he speak in detail about that?
Not on that interview. I mean, he's spoken about it a million times before. Essentially, he and a consortium of investors,
Fusion Entertainment,
put together,
correct?
Yeah, Fusion Media heard all but, well, they'd actually announced that they were buying WCW for tens of millions of dollars, maybe 50 million or whatever it was. I cannot remember, but it was many, many millions more than what Vince paid for it. Put it this way, it was all a fix. There was no way that Eric was ever going to get it. And later on, there have been theories that there was a mole within WCW that was talking to the WWF around that time to make sure that they got the company and not Eric for, as you say, pennies on the dollar, which they eventually did. So it didn't matter how much Eric was going to offer. There was someone in there making sure. And also, from an earlier lawsuit that was settled, Vince won the right to match any offer that WCW received as far as a buyout, a purchase of the company as well.
Well, is this person a certain former skateboarder? Are we speculating? Because that person ended up becoming head of talent relations and one of Vince's right-hand men.
No.
It's just speculation. I didn't know. I was just trying to piece it together because he was an agent.
No, apparently there's a guy called Stu Snyder.
I know who Stu Snyder is, yeah.
Yeah, WCW and then migrate to WWF. That's a theory, by the way, anyway. But
well, the thing with Eric, just this is the fact that I've heard through interviews, his assumption with it was Fusion wanted to buy it. I believe it was 40 million, but it was definitely tens of millions of dollars. It was up there in the 40 to 50 range. They did not have the TV rights attached to that sale. So it's like, why are we buying a company if we can't continue to be on TNT, TBS, or have any Turner TV to go along with it. TV licensing fees or TV licensing deals are the heart and soul of any wrestling company now. That's what's making WWE and AEW so much money. It's the ability to be on network TV. This is why I believe in the end that it fell through from Fusion, because they're like, what are we buying if we can't even put the product? They thought it would be a natural, I guess, like pivot. It's the same WCW, Nitro, Thunder, whatever it might be, just different ownership, different management, maybe different creative direction. But essentially, you're still going to see it on Mondays and Thursdays. When that went out the window, I believe that opened up the door for WWF.
Yeah, Jamie Kellner was an executive who was sort of put in basically a position to do something with WCW when AOL and Time Warner merged. And he had come from a background, I think he just died recently, in fact, as well. This year, I believe, Jamie Kellner died. He came from women's programming, essentially. He was a big proponent of women's programming. WCW didn't fit the bill because, if nothing else, it's just damn embarrassing, that show. It was losing a huge amount of money. AOL, Time Warner would lose so many billions more in a quarter. But it was not his kind of programming. He hated wrestling. It was the first thing to go, pretty much. Later on, he would achieve notoriety, as it were, by saying that anyone who bought a TiVo box, it was tantamount to stealing, because you weren't going to sit there and watch the adverts, watch the commercials, which apparently he'd never heard of a remote control or a VCR. But that was maybe his most famous public statement he made that made headlines at one point in the early 2000s.
Was he the guy who killed WCW? He's one of the people who got interviewed for that, correct?
I don't think Jamie Kellner was.
There was somebody with glasses who was sitting there and had kind of like art or something behind him, and he was speaking about it, but I thought it might have been him. I could be wrong.
I did see he died on the 21st of June. I don't think he was in that documentary. There was Bill Bush, I think, was in it. A couple of others of executives. And yes, launched both Fox and the WB, Jamie Kellner. So he was very much a bigwig in media. And it's one of those things that I think, well, you know, he was the one who killed WCW. It's like, no, WCW killed itself at the end. I mean, the views were, for the time, the views are amazing now, but for the time, the views were flagging. It was losing money, and the show was basically looked at as anything with a run, aside from a soap opera, like name any sitcom, name any drama. It's got a beginning, it peters out, then it's got the end, and then we finish it for good. They looked at WCW like that, not something cyclical that went for until the end of time, pretty much.
Yeah, there was definitely a few jump the shark moments. To use the Happy Days reference, if you ever saw that show, let's do the test.
Oh, God, yeah.
So the jumping the shark is where Fonzie jumped the shark on his motorcycle, and then the show was pretty much done after that. So WCW had plenty of that. And WCW would sometimes, well, more than sometimes, make a commitment or a decision to go in a direction and then completely reverse that and go back to the old direction with the old people and all that stuff. And it just, I think it confused people, where you can't get emotionally invested if the company doesn't look emotionally invested in the direction they're going into.
I remember specifically when I was watching at the time, I've never watched it back, there was missing the Misfits in Action, I'm sorry, and it had Hugh Morris. Oh, I'm sorry, he was called General Erection or G Erection. I know Vince Russo's your man, but your boy, but Jesus, come off it. Awful. That was a horrible group everything was horrible at that time. I hated 2000. It was all the wrestling I could watch at the time, unless I got tapes. I remember there being a Hell in a Cell rip-off with the MIA versus whoever, and I was like, how can you have like a 6-person or 8-person or whatever match it was between two groups in a Hell in a Cell and make me not care one iota? That takes talent.
Well, you put cages on top of each other, too. That's the way you solved that problem.
That was the triple tier cage match with Dallas Page and
David Arquette. He won the title.
Arquette, he won the title. I watched that. I watched it. I watched him win. No, he was defending the title in that one, I think, Arquette. He won the title in a tag team match by pinning Eric Bischoff.
Yes, you're right. And then Jeff Jarrett hit Page over the head with the guitar, and that's when David Arquette went over in that as well, I believe. Am I wrong?
I remember Arquette wrestling Tank Abbott once. I remember that very clearly.
Ooh.
And I also remember, I'm going to step away from the microphone because I'm going to make a noise now, is David Arquette apparently had just turned heel the night after the pay-per-view, and he grabbed the microphone and just went, "Shut up!" like that. Instead of a normal person saying "shut up," he made that noise.
Yeah. Your noise gate literally engaged when you did that. The mic didn't even
Yeah,
like
I know.
the mic didn't even like that sound.
I know. I did my best. Okay, well, I mean, look, it was just terrible. It was terrible programming. We know why it died. It deserved to die, which is such a shame because of the rich history of WCW. And the fact is that when WCW died, WWF, I presume, thought, oh, we'll get all of their fans. There's no competition. No, they disappeared for the most part. WWF pretty much lost, between the beginning of the invasion and the end of the invasion, a third of their audience in like 8 months.
It almost doesn't even make sense at all. I don't know. Well, that goes along with the fact that all you saw on WC or WWE TV with the WCW talent was these guys are not as good. So that does make sense now that I'm kind of fleshing it out verbally, that if you're a fan, a diehard fan of WCW, and you see your favorite, first of all, your favorite WCW wrestlers are not coming to WWE. Goldberg, Sting, I think Luger, Jarrett got fired, and you might say whatever you want about Jarrett, but Jarrett was a big part of the show during the end. So if those were at least 4 people or more people you wanted to watch, even Kronik, they waited to bring Kronik in for 6 or so. You're not going to captivate or capture the audience unless you really hit them with WCW from day one of everybody.
Absolutely.
Like day one of Goldberg, Sting, all these people, you didn't get that. So you got WCW light. You got essentially low to mid card WCW, and then most of the fans are going to go away and not come back.
Yeah. The only people who were brought in that had any impact in WCW, it was Booker T, Dallas Page, who he was brought in because I guess he, was for the reasons. He took pennies on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar pretty much to come in, just to get absolutely ruined. Booker T came in, and then there was Lance Storm, and you can argue Bill DeMott as well, because I think he was like US title around that as well. So just to clarify something you said before, which you were right, there are 2 different types of contracts with WCW. Well, one with WCW and one with Turner Broadcasting. And the higher paid talent would be signed directly to Turner. They would guarantee the money after WCW was sold. So quite frankly, anyone who stayed out should have done. They were getting full pay to sit at home, relax, rehab their injuries. Goldberg did it. The Outsiders, Hogan, Flair, Steiner, Goldberg.
Yeah, and those were no-cut contracts. That's a dream for wrestlers. No cut means, in this case, the company went out of business, they still have to pay. And that was I think that was the first model of a network subsidizing a wrestling company, because Spike did it with TNA, and now Warner Brothers with AEW. And even I would say, who knows what, TV licensing deals kind of subsidize, how you pay. So Fox, USA, now Netflix. Is that going to be a continuing theme of networks footing the bill for some of the talent contracts and even paying for some of the arenas?
I believe that Spike actually paid Sting's contract and maybe Kurt Angle's contract. They invest more than I think people realise. Spike did into TNA over quite a few years. But future episode TNA, take a drink. Let's talk about the day. So as I say, 3 days before Raw is War, where this is announced publicly on the show, WWF programming, the WWF announces that WCW is being bought by them, and for a very, very cheap price. What was the mood of the locker room at Raw that day? Because this is going to be the day of the Nitro simulcast.
First, about that simulcast, never been done to that degree ever in wrestling, and never been done since that night. So it was very interesting to watch this. And also with 3 days notice to get the TV trucks down there, to get everything lined up. I got to give WWE credit for at least moving very quickly once it was done, because they could have waited till the week after, but they knew it was probably a hot news cycle that it was getting bought. They needed to capitalize on that and do something on Monday. So creative in a pinch, got all these different things in line, and Shane owning WCW and Vin, all that stuff was, I believe, done pretty well. Our thought, I think the overarching theme, which is easy to guess, well, there's no competition, so what's going to happen to my pay? What's going to happen to my booking now that we don't know how many dozens of WCW guys are going to come in? Are we going to get released immediately after Raw? There's all these different things going throughout the locker room. We instantly knew every bit, at least on our level, not maybe the Takers, the Austins, and all that stuff. Any leverage or any negotiating tactic that you would employ to go somewhere else, to work somewhere else, was absolutely gone. And you would say, too, that at this time, 2001, they're still kind of paying for the XFL, which was a huge money loser. That was in like 99 and 2000. So they bought this. So they're obviously already in kind of a money cutting mode from the XFL to try to see how they can recoup that money. Then they buy this. They have more talent. And there were a lot of guys that I think in the end, that as the months and years went down, had their contracts, quote, renegotiated, much like mine. And they had people get pay cuts or either take this or go. And TNA wasn't even it wasn't even any kind of thought in anybody's mind for another 2 years. And wasn't the TNA that had the regular TV. This was weekly pay-per-views that I started to believe in 2003. So
I was going to say 2.
It might be 2, but either way, there was still at least from March 26, 2001 to whatever in 2002, 2003, that there was nothing else but WWF at the time.
June 19th, 2002. Yes, I remember because with Dutch Mantel, he went another 15 months afterwards. So yeah, the only thing that was really happening at the time, wrestling-wise, a few months later, there was this WWA tour that was based in Australia, where they get a lot of the old WCW guys going. And I think Hulk Hogan had Excitement Wrestling Federation, and then just all the usual indies really sort of trying to fill in the spot of ECW, like, Blue Meanies 3PW and XPW and CZW and stuff like that as well. Then Ring of Honor, I think, would also come 2002 or around that time.
Yeah, but this wasn't full-time work where you can make a living or anything. Yeah. So if you got pushed out by WWF at the time, or you got your pay cut, you just were kind of like, well, here we are. Because now, once again, now the competition supposedly stepped up. Now you got to fight for an opportunity. And of course, they are going to expand the TV or do whatever they can, but there was still just Raw and SmackDown. They weren't 3 hours each or 2 hours to 3 hours each. So I believe was Raw 3 hours at this time or 2 hours?
No. They wouldn't go 3 hours permanently until like 2011 or something.
Okay. It feels like they've been doing it for 40 years.
Yeah. Every episode feels like 40 years. Right. Having said that, also, I need to also point out on your points that Japan was really dying as well, because New Japan, ever since Inoki was getting on this kick of bringing in MMA guys and killing his own business, New Japan wasn't doing so well. All Japan, a couple of years or a year earlier, had that big exodus with everyone joining Noah instead.
Because
Muta
ran Noah, or owned part of Noah, correct?
Misawa, I think he moved. I think he was the big star in Noah at the time.
Yeah, Noah was definitely gaining some traction. New Japan was a little bit up against the ropes with some of their guys going over there. But you're talking about flying all the way to Australia for WWA. You're talking about flying all the way to Japan. These guys from WCW were not working the heaviest of schedules when this happened. Even going from WCW to WWF at the time, you're working a lot more, and you're only getting paid when you work. You might have a downside, but the opportunity and the amount of bookings and getting on pay-per-views was still house shows and pay-per-views, and then merchandise and action figures and video games were where you were going to make some real money. Basically, the TV was an infomercial to try to get you more popular, more booked on the other things.
I was just thinking, man, that NWO trademark was worth $2.5 million on its own. Anyway, well, that being as it may,
what do you think the BWO trademark would be worth?
I think it would be worth a pretty penny, I reckon. You don't wear the T-shirts enough. You should be plugging those more on the show.
All right. I'll work on it. I don't even have a T-shirt outside of the break glass in case of six-figure payoff.
Well, don't look at me. For that, do not look at me.
We're having a good month, though. I'm happy with it.
No, we are. We're having a great month. That being said, Vince McMahon. We'll get to Vince McMahon in a bit. What's the reaction in the back when we start going to the WCW stuff specifically? I know you were saying about where we're going to work and everything, but just like the sheer shock of it all and anything else in the locker room and backstage, you remember?
Well, I remember my thought throughout it. I was trying to kind of temper myself between the obvious paranoia that everybody was going through about their future in the company and the future of pro wrestling and the future of how the workers were going to get paid, what we were going to do. Are they going to take guaranteed contracts away? You have all these thoughts and these murmurs throughout the locker room and catering. But there was still a part of me as a wrestling fan growing up that was like, I'm legitimately, it's not like I look back 10 years later and say, we were looking at wrestling history. Like I knew that night, we're watching something that will never, ever happen again. At least I thought it would. It might, who knows with WWE, with their ID and all this other stuff that they're doing to try to expand. But I never thought I would see anything like this in my lifetime. So there was a part of me that was trying to almost appreciate the moments that I was looking around and going, wow, this is crazy. Like, this is a wrestling thing. And, you look at the PWIs throughout the years, and that was my thing, the magazines and PWI and Inside Wrestling, where it was like the WWF versus WCW dream matches and what would be like if WrestleMania versus Starrcade and all this stuff. I'm like, let's hope we're going to see some of that.
Were you a big Apter? Were you a big Apter mag reader in the day?
Apter mag?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I challenged them for the Office Wrestling Championship and lost just like any other wrestler. Bill Apter, undefeated. Goldberg, your streak means nothing. The Office Wrestling Champion, Bill Apter. And one of the best. I don't know why Bill Apter is not in every Hall of Fame. That guy is definitely a national treasure when it comes to wrestling.
I need to interview that dude.
You didn't?
I've never interviewed him.
All right,
no.
I'm going to text Bill. I'll let him know.
Do it. I think I nearly did right at the beginning of when I started WSI, but you could only do it nighttime his time. I was like, I'm not staying up till 4 a.m.
It might be worth it. It might be worth it. I'm 100%.
Might be worth it.
Bill, I'll say this about Bill. First of all, anytime I was around him, the enthusiasm, he still has I would say, I don't know how old he is, in the 70s at least, has a childlike appreciation still for the business. When you're around him and you're talking wrestling, it just feels so much more fun. He does impressions. He does the Dusty impression and this other stuff and everything. He's a national treasure when it comes to professional wrestling. And I never heard anybody, I've never seen Bill mad, cut a promo, be frustrated. I was mad twice this morning before we even recorded. Bill, I've never seen mad. Never seen him do anything outside of just try to have fun while he's somewhat in the wrestling business. I think a couple people I can't think of the names, but I remember a couple people didn't treat Bill. Maybe it was some of the younger generation that didn't have the knowledge to know who Bill Apter is or was and kind of blew him off like a mark. And I was just like, man, that's just if I was there, I would say something. I would open my mouth because Bill is not one of those guys that does anything ever to deserve any kind of disrespect or even a sideways look or, with anybody. He just brings out the best. I think he just brings out the best in everybody's personality around him because he makes the business overwhelmingly more fun than it should be.
The reason I brought up Apter was because in all the Apter mags, there was always dream matches between WWF and WCW and loads in the magazines all the time. So this is something that was 15 years in the making, really, or nearly 15 years for the existence of WCW. So
no, they took care of that, didn't they? They sure took care of that.
Man, let me tell you, did they take me, who was a maniac for wrestling at 14 or whatever it was then, and by the end of the invasion, they made me go from someone who I used to tape every single show, watch them back probably more than once, just obsessed with wrestling, to within 6 months they managed to get me to basically pretty much stop watching altogether, or just watch here and
As
there.
a young teenager, it ruined your entire suspension of disbelief.
It ruined my entire enjoyment of wrestling. I hated it. Hated it. I just thought it was such a colossal letdown.
So you probably just explained why they lost so many millions of viewers over that 6 or 7 month period that you talked about earlier.
Yeah. Do you remember the UWF invasion of the NWA?
Oh, that was awesome. That was awesome.
Yeah. All they did was just beat every single one of them to death and then just erased it. And that's basically
No,
just
but I think it
what
was
this
awesome just because that was the original invasion. And UWF was awesome. And they just, I guess WWE did kind of what NWA did at the time. They brought them in. It was essentially maybe tryouts for everybody. As the Joker would say in The Dark Knight, we're going to have tryouts. So it broke the stick in half, said, make it quick. I can only pick one of you. But really, that's what it was. Because I remember my memory of UWF was ECW before ECW. There was brawls, blood. It was gritty. And it reminded me of the original NWA that I talked about on a previous episode, where I said I fell in love with wrestling watching this NWA with Paul Jones, Jimmy Valiant, them beating Jimmy Valiant up, trying to shave his head. And it just had such a gritty look to it. That was UWF. But I remember like being so excited to see, believe it or not, Brad Armstrong and Tim Horner teaming up on the TBS morning show. I was like, these guys were in UWF like last week. And then seeing Eddie Gilbert and then seeing, they did it right. They sprinkled people in over the course of like 4 to 6 months. And then they started to, I guess, vet people to see who would fit into the culture, the locker room. I'm sure money had a lot to do with it as well. You know, and that's where Sting came from. You know, Sting became a huge star because he carried over from UWF. He was in Hot Stuff Incorporated with Eddie Gilbert and did that thing. But he really broke out because WCW, maybe it was Flair, NWA, then WCW. Flair saw something in him and they brought him along. I wish that Vince we got to put it in context though. This company nearly put him out of business. They were taking the water coolers out of Titan Tower. So he had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, but if he did business the right way, he could have cultivated so many talents. This includes Bagwell and other people that could have had 5, 10, 15-year runs in WWE.
Another thing with the UWF is Jim Crockett, you know, money was like water to him, apparently. They were doing so much great business and just lost millions. One of the things was buying UWF. It's like they were dying. They were losing like $50,000 a week. You could have just let them die and then just pick up whoever you wanted afterwards. But no, he spent millions. UWF is going to be a story for another day, I guess. When the simulcast starts, when Vince McMahon is in the ring, I believe you have a story about watching Vince's performance backstage.
Well, Vince wasn't in the ring. The opening of the show was this.
Yeah.
The opening of the show.
But I thought, I'm teeing you up here now. I thought there was a story where you were watching him in the ring when he's firing everybody or talking about what WCW is going to be, and you were watching it with somebody else or seeing somebody else's reaction.
Well, we were around the monitor. So it had the box trust monitor and everybody's watching it. And this was, I believe the story you're thinking of is Shawn Michaels was being very belligerent, very, very belligerent. And this is a story Triple H has already openly talked about in interviews. And I think Triple H even pulled him aside. I'm not sure the exact accuracy. But yeah, this, for me, I think this was the first time, if I'm not mistaken, the first time I was actually in the same hemisphere as Shawn Michaels. And to give people a little bit of context and history, Shawn Michaels is the reason why I got into the wrestling business. Shawn Michaels, obviously, the super kick, Stevie kick, all that stuff. I couldn't do much more except the super kick, not doing anything else to Shawn Michaels anywhere close to it. He's a million times the athlete I am. But I remember coming into the building and seeing Shawn earlier in the day, and I was like, I really want to go up, introduce myself to him and tell him he's the reason why I'm here and thank him for the inspiration. I'm talking about Midnight Rocker. Shawn Michaels is what I watched in the AWA and then followed his career through WWF. I never really got a chance to because he was probably like not right next to me, but like one or two people down to the right of me as I'm watching the monitor from this angle. And he was mean, dude. He was being very mean. And he was, you could tell the eyes were glazed over. The eyes were like beady, like squinting and just stumbling a little bit. I don't know the exact, I just knew something was up. I'm not very, like, I can't say, oh, he took 2 somas and this and that. I don't know anything about pills, drugs, alcohol, any of that stuff. I just knew he wasn't with it, and he was just giving people side eyes. He was angry that day about something. I don't know what it was. This just accentuated it, and I think I do remember someone kind of pulling him aside and just back towards, I believe it was Cleveland, Ohio, where the Raw was taking place. Not sure, the Cleveland Arena. But they pulled him back, and there was maybe an office or the hallway behind where the monitor was open by Gorilla. And then I didn't see him for the rest of the time. I think they just sent him home. If I remember the Triple H interview, which is recent, I think this year he actually spoke about it, and so did Shawn. So they're very open and transparent about that night and the experience that Shawn had and the experience Triple H had dealing with Shawn. So that's what I remember from it. And I just remember I walked away. And number one, what I felt like was not the, oh man, this was my chance to go up to Shawn and he ruined it or anything. I was like, oh my God, I hope this dude's going to be okay. Because it was it was very awkward, very off-putting, but maybe a little bit scary. Every thought in my mind was, okay, Hunter, before Hunter grabbed him and kind of pulled him aside was, man, is this dude driving? Is he driving alone? And he's obviously not. Like, is anybody going to say anything? Like, there might be people like this, still Shawn Michaels. He's tied into Triple H. He's tied into the office. If you go up and say, hey, Shawn, do you need a ride or anything? He may like get offended by that. Like, who are you to think I need a ride? I'm fine. And this, whatever. And somehow you get heat and this night, above all else, everybody was puckered up a little tighter than usual. Everybody was more apprehensive and walking on eggshells. And with this situation going on, which I'm not saying it was like a 3 to 4 hour situation. I think it was somewhere during the night, maybe towards the beginning of the show, where everybody's watching and going back and forth with the simulcast. This was just kind of happening in everybody's peripheral vision. And like I said, Triple H tells the story a lot better. I love the fact that he pulled him aside and Hunter was very honest and transparent, and so was Shawn looking back on that situation. But it didn't help an already stressful situation with the whole group of people, and now you got this, and you're like, ooh, and maybe that's it. I'm not going to go up to Shawn and say anything. I'm not going to go up to Shawn and like, hey, do you need any help? Can I drive you back to the hotel or anything? Because maybe they were looking for a reason to fire everybody that day. Anybody and everybody who crossed whatever line they were looking at. They were looking for any excuse, which is kind of what we're going to get into with the Bagwell match.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if Shawn ever shows up again until like the next year at that point. I don't, because Shawn appears so sporadically here and there.
I don't remember him until he came back, and I believe the run with Hunter where he came back to wrestle at SummerSlam 2002. I believe that was Nassau, Long Island. I remember one of the best matches I've watched, and I remember after that match, because it was no secret to anybody that I still like really looked up to Shawn as far as a talent and the inspiration to get into the business. So when that match happened, Shawn was, man, they wanted each other. Shawn was a bloody mess. That's when he came out with the jeans and the wife beater shirt, but he was a bloody mess. So was Hunter, which is probably funny because I remember standing there and they had Shawn back there and they were kind of like looking at him, trying to make sure he's okay, maybe cleaning him up. And I was kind of hovering around, and Bradshaw, of all people, come up to me and he said, he wasn't being mean. He goes, go up to your hero, man, and talk to him. I'm like, I don't know, John. And he said, no, go talk to him. So I went up, hey, man, great match. And I think Hunter was right next to him or like 2 down, getting cleaned up. And I just U-turned and walked away. Didn't say a thing. No. Ha ha. So any heat or anything Triple H did to me after that point, I probably deserved.
All
I
5
just
foot 2 of them.
completely no-sold them and ignored them.
What did you think of Shane McMahon turning up then? I'm presuming you were sat in the back watching it live.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely stayed till the end of the show. I don't really ever want to stay till the end of the show, but this was a show I wanted to stay and see the finish because nobody knew. Nobody knew about the Jeff Jarrett thing. Nobody knew about who Vince was going to hire and fire on TV, more accurately, fire. That was probably the theme of it. And nobody really knew, except for down there in Panama City where Nitro was, that Shane McMahon and Bruce Pritchard or whoever else was even there. So that's a whole nother story that Bagwell actually tells better in his thing because he was right there seeing the trucks pull up, seeing Shane there, seeing everybody else. Shane had a meeting saying some people are staying, some people are going, something to that effect. Now everybody go and have fun. That thing. But I remember watching it, and I remember there was rumblings about just here and there. If you're in the production office or something's going on or people are talking, there was hopes that Vince would keep WCW as its own brand, that Nitro and Thunder or whatever TV they would have, you wouldn't see WCW wrestlers until Royal Rumble, Survivor Series, or maybe just WrestleMania 4, that Aftermag Dream Card once a year, which I think would have been amazing. Keep it separate and then bring them together once, maybe twice a year. Can you imagine if they played their cards right and then the draft became a thing? Dude, that was you talking about sitting on a gold mine.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the draft, that would happen about, 5 months afterwards, 6 months afterwards, something like that after the invasion is done with.
I thought it was a lot longer than that. I didn't think there was a draft for a bit.
No, April. Sure. So Survivor Series 2001, and I think the draft was like April 2002.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I remember Ric Flair drafted me number 12. Sorry, I was a bust, Rick. Sorry about that.
Hey, 12's not bad.
12 was great. I mean, he wasted a pick on me, I think.
Keep in mind also that was never going to happen as far as WWF Nitro or WCW Raw is War or whatever it was going to be. I believe beforehand they tried to shop WCW as its own entity around to networks and no one was having it. And then they figured out maybe we should change the name of one of our shows already, and the channels were not having it because WCW was a horribly tainted brand by that point. And
so there was effort. There was an effort. There was maybe an original plan to keep it separate or split the show, much like we got a roster split now. So Raw would have been WWE and SmackDown would have been essentially WCW. Or
amazingly, the opposite. They were actually going to change Raw into Nitro.
No,
so
USA
they're actually going to have
would
SmackDown.
not have that. Oh man, Bonnie Hammer and that was their golden goose. At one time, WWE was the golden goose of USA Network. USA Network was just kind of like, I don't know, like low budget Cinemax type TV series or whatever at one point. And WWE put them on the map. So yeah, I would not want to change that formula for anything.
That being said, we're going to get to the Buff Bagwell match in a bit, but your reaction was Shane McMahon actually coming out then. So nobody knew backstage. Nobody was told anything. Nobody was told any future storylines regarding this.
Oh God, I don't even think there was any future storylines to even talk about. Potential storylines. I think you're talking about the sale was finalized 3 days before Raw, correct? The simulcast. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There was no time to do anything but get those satellite trucks, get the agents down there. Maybe Shane was that day. I mean, this creative thing, and I say, when you don't overthink it, you don't do as bad as when you do overthink it. So it might have been a benefit that they didn't have a month to get in their own way. Because I think the simulcasting with two different sets of satellite trucks, two different locations, writing that show last minute, essentially, I think it was one of the better Raws and the better Nitros out there. It was historic just by default, but I still think the way it flowed and what it did, it kept you interested with what was going on. If they could have duplicated that and had angles across companies and shows from time to time. Wow, that's another golden goose right there.
I actually watched Nitro because I didn't have WWF, I didn't have Sky Sports at the time, which was a HBO or something like that, or ESPN. It was premium add-on cable package that we didn't have at the time. So I watched the Nitro version of it live, and that was crazy seeing all Scott Hudson just say what's going to happen with all our jobs, and I'm sure that's genuinely what they're feeling as well. Now I'm going to ask you a couple more things. Shane, do you think he would have, let's say if WCW could be its own entity, and I believe the idea was that he would run WCW, at least initially that was the idea. Mm-hmm. Do you think he would have done a good job? Was he mature enough? Did he have the experience enough to have a AAA mainstream wrestling show under his steed?
I think he would have had people around him and delegated enough to have. Vince delegates to a certain point. He had Pat Patterson, he had his agents, he had his yes man, he had his inner circle that would definitely give him the information he needed if something was going on in the company. Shane would have had a similar setup. Would he been mature enough? I don't know. Shane thinks of some crazy stuff, as you see with most of his matches. That does not isolate itself into his matches. But if he had somebody to filter that out into, yeah, let's get crazy and a little bit more underground and gritty and everything, but let's think this guy's going to get killed doing this or get maimed. That's good. I'd rather have that, by the way. Let's go way out and think crazy, and then let's bring it a little bit back more into a grounded reality. Then we have something that's somewhere in between. Now, Shane came up just like Stephanie did. They can make fun of them or say whatever they want about their shortcomings or whatever they might lack that they think Vince has. But these two kids, and they're not kids anymore, but when they were kids, Vince put them in each and every department, setting the ring up with the production people, working in the office. They literally had to learn every aspect of the company as children and then go in. They paid their dues. Vince did not hand them anything. So I'd say if Shane could call back on that and have a little bit of a base, like a baseline of business with that. And then Shane's also facilitated certain things. He's worked with China on certain on-demand and pay-per-view stuff. He's worked with people internationally in the past. So I think he probably wouldn't have been as good as he is now, but he would have had more to do. And by the way, he's family. So you don't think him and Vince are going to talk? You don't think him and Linda? Linda would probably be the driving force, just like with WWE, on the back-end business side of WCW. And she would help Shane with that.
How well was the reveal done, the surprise of Shane turning up? How surprised were you, I guess?
Surprised. I think it was awesome. I think there was guesswork. We thought it might be Bischoff. It might be Vince versus Bischoff, which would have been really good. But the twist of Shane would have been, you talk about the minor details. McMahon owns WCW. McMahon owns WCW. That was the whole thing, little littered throughout the episode. Shane's promo was perfection. The name on the contract does say McMahon. Shane McMahon. Dude, how can you get any better than that? Vince's reaction, and we are left with something that we don't get hardly at all, if never anymore. A cliffhanger. What's going to happen next week? It was that whole episode, that simulcast, it still brings sort of goosebumps as a wrestling fan watching it and getting to be actually like behind the scenes watching it all unfold. You have to have an appreciation for that.
I'm surprised Vince didn't fire Jerry McDevitt that day for drafting that contract. He's the worst lawyer in the world, apparently. How can you get the name wrong on it?
Well, I mean, he did better with the NDAs. I mean, you got to give Jerry a little bit of grace.
Yeah. Stick to what you're good at, I guess, in that sense. One more thing with Vince McMahon firing people live, I guess. Well, you're predicting one of them. Or you're not predicting. He does mention Jeff Jarrett. Now, he asked for reactions like big pop up on up, big pop up on down. Why he didn't say Scott Steiner, I don't know. But anyway, Lex Luger and Hulk Hogan received a negative reaction from fans. I don't think Jeff Jarrett received any reaction. Buff Bagwell, Booker T, Scott Steiner, Sting, and Goldberg receive, I think Goldberg receives the biggest reaction, received positive reactions. Then Vince says, well, guess what? WCW is going on the shelf. It's going nowhere. I'm not going to do anything with it. And then we have the Shane reveal. When you're watching Vince do that backstage, do you have any sense that this is a character he's playing, or do you have just more of a sense that, well, that's just Vince just being a power play and talking about he's a billionaire who's erased his competition, and that's actually just him?
Vince is loving it. I just mentioned earlier, this company, Ted Turner, these talents essentially too, which he's going to take it out on them, was almost responsible for putting his family out of business. He was enjoying it. And obviously in the character, he can enjoy it. He's Mr. McMahon. So it's veiled within that, but it's secretly, this was like, definitely a shoot. Now the talents and all that stuff, the thumbs up, thumbs down, I don't know if I agree with that if you parse that part of it out. You don't say, hey, do you want me to keep this, keep that? Hey, by the way, I'm shelving the whole company. I know in the end, Shane brings it back, but how many people may have shut it off right then and there? WCW fans, right? Oh, you're never going to see WCW again. I'd love to see, I know the ratings were good, but I don't know if they just flatlined from that promo on. I was just kind of in awe because this was still in the age where Vince McMahon would never acknowledge another company. He would never say a talent outside of WWF at the time. He would never say their name. So to hear Vince speak these taboo names and even just talking about WCW, you never heard Vince, even in a sense with a production meeting or anything like that up to that point, from what I can remember, even mention WCW. That's why I'm so shocked that Triple H and other people even refer to AEW as anything or talk about TNA. Vince would never do that. That was always, hey, if you're first, you never even talk and punch down the second. If you're second, you're constantly trying to punch up. So when he talked these names, there was a secret thing in me wow, we're definitely seeing and hearing things that we never saw or heard before. But he loved it.
Vince,
he loved it. Oh yeah, he had a Cheshire cat grin on his face. He was loving it.
Vince did mention WCW a couple of times. I remember one when he was introducing Dwayne Gill, of all people, as Mankind's mystery opponent at Survivor Series 98. And I think one time maybe when Jeff Jarrett had jumped back from WCW to the WWF as well. But they were two of the only times that Vince would mention that kind of thing. We shall move on.
I'll give you an example about Vince McMahon. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
We did the ECW Invasion, Manhattan Center in New York. ECW invaded. BWO had a match. I had a match with little Guido. Thank you again, Guido, for putting me over. He's a shooter. He could have taken me out at any time he wanted to. So they were talking about BWO, and then Lawler says, oh, it's a cheap ripoff of NWO. And then Vince said something like, oh, NWO, isn't that a clothing line? He was just trying to kind of, it's nothing to me. That's the Vince I'm used to.
Okay, then. So to set up the scene, Steve Austin turns at WrestleMania 17, and then he teams with Triple H, and then it's just sort of a dead couple of months, really, with the WWF, or at least that's how I seem to remember it. TNN is unhappy with the idea, as I said before. We're turning WWF Raw into WWF Nitro, or WCW Raw, or whatever it's going to be. So really, the WCW question has been sort of left pretty much in the air to fester for a couple of months and cool off, quite frankly. Then there's a slew of WCW invaders starting from late May. Lance Storm, Bill DeMott, Mike Awesome, people like that. And then the initial... and then there's King of the Ring, and then the Invasion pay-per-view itself. 775,000 people bought the Invasion pay-per-view. Didn't even have that much of a star-powered main event. It did unbelievable. This is how excited people were. Just before that, though, the first official WCW match, WWF Aurora's War in Tacoma, Washington, would be Buff Bagwell versus Booker T. Nick Patrick would be the referee, and on commentary, Arn Anderson and Scott Hudson. Now, this is another match like the Kronik match that we're going to talk about later that has almost gone down in legend as one of the worst matches of all time. You've seen it today. I've seen it today as well. What went wrong? What went maybe not as wrong as people remember?
I don't think anything went wrong in the match. I don't think anything was done wrong by Buff Bagwell, and he gets a bad rap for this match because he's the fallout from this match as far as the first one to publicly get fired outside of Jeff Jarrett. But within the scope of the WCW guys cannot hang with the WWF guys. Booker T went on to survive the whole thing. So here's my theory. You did, and it's not a hard theory for anybody with common sense to figure out. Vince almost gets put out of business by WCW. Vince has a chip on his shoulder. Vince obviously is having a good time with that simulcast and purchasing WCW. Of course, Shane, being the owner of WCW, puts Vince back on his heels a little bit with the character Mr. McMahon. So he kind of gets outsmarted. So Vince is still doing somewhat good business. But with this match, the company, and more specifically Vince and everybody in creative who had anything to do with putting this match on as the main event in Tacoma, Washington. Now you might think, well, when are they going to put it on? How long should they wait to put on a WCW main event on Monday Night Raw? Well, maybe 7 days later when they're in Atlanta, Georgia, the home of WCW. The home, basically, of Buff Bagwell, who will probably get a really great reaction. The home of WCW, where Booker T will be well known by the local people who buy tickets to be in the arena. I believe Phillips Arena back then. If you're not convinced with this one example that they were never, ever going to let the WCW talent, at least the ones they didn't pick to already succeed, and I believe Booker was one of those people that they saw something in. Now let's take Bagwell's personality and whatever heat for opening his mouth, his personality, kind of interacting with wrestlers, agents, office, whatever it might be. You set this match up in the world's eyes to fail. It was not a bad match. It was a good match, actually, if you look at it. Bagwell and Booker T have wrestled a ton of times. They had good chemistry, if not great chemistry. They still had to get used to the ring size. I keep kind of beating that horse to death that they need to get used to the ring. Now, Bagwell did go to the wrestling school. There's a story about that with him and Shane Helms. So they were training to an extent. The stiffness of the ring is different. The size of the ring, the timing. Also, it doesn't help that before Bagwell goes out there, he's already told the story. Shane McMahon tells him, do not look into the camera. That was a big thing in WWE. Never, ever, ever look into the camera. So Shane told him in Gorilla, do not look into the camera, which already kind of throws Bagwell off because on his entrance, he's doing all this stuff right in the camera, talking to the camera, doing all these different things to interact with the fans at home. So you tell a performer that's getting ready, probably nervous, going out there, the main event of Raw, always wanted to be in a main event. Your first match in WWF at the time is on Raw against a guy you have great chemistry with. And now you're already told you can't be Buff Bagwell in the entrance. You have to, and they gave him pyro. It wasn't like they put him out there like, hey, come back from commercial. Marcus Bagwell, Barry O, doing that treatment. It was a mixed bag, mixed signals. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they rehearsed his entrance. They weren't going to say, just stand anywhere on the stage. The pyro will take care of itself. So he had an idea that they were investing something into that match. So I don't think it helps either. Just a minor point. I don't think it helps either that you recreated the WCW logo to look like something that was created in the free version of Canva. Like it's so Shutterstock, right? It's not like you stripped the entire identity away from the company with the branding. Then you stripped the first impression anybody's going to get of this guy as a casual WWF fan. And now he's dodging the camera, trying to get away from the camera rather than talking to the people to say, I'm Buff Bagwell, I'm the stuff, and doing, you see what I mean? You're already like neutering the guy before he even gets out there. Plus, mentally, dude, I don't know if you've ever been in the wrestling locker room or by the wrestling entrance, but you can imagine you've competed and you've done martial arts. What if somebody comes up and says, hey, we need for you to take a look at this water bill and pay the water bill and your music's hitting, right? You're like, dude, leave me the F alone. You know, that's how, like, you got to get into, imagine going up to the Ultimate Warrior and saying, hey, we'd like for you to read these passages from War and Peace as your music's hitting. Like, you get into a mental state. They did everything they could to take him out. Now, let's not even talk about, I don't know if Bagwell's ever said this. I've been in the ring where they switch your time constantly. In other words, they could have had 12. And then when he was in Gorilla, you got 6. And then when you're out there, you got 20. Now you got 15. Oh, you're going through the finish? We need another 3 minutes. Those all could have happened. You know, then after the match, Bagwell's presented with, I don't know if it was booked this way in the end, he's presented with that they're all going to beat up Booker T. Him, Austin, Kurt Angle, I don't know. Those were the guys in that beatdown, right? Beat him up, and they threw Booker out the door. I don't know if Bagwell was queued up that Austin and Angle were going to beat the hell out of him afterwards and throw him out the door. And that's the last impression you get. That was not by accident. Think about it.
When I watched the match, and I actually watched it on silent because I was doing something else at the time, but I did watch the match fully focused on it. And this is coming from someone who is, admittedly, I think Buff for at least up to 99, like the 97 to 99 run, I think is actually very underappreciated. He's full of energy, full of fun. And he's sort of just like classic pro wrestler, over the top. I love myself. I think he's a really good character. Having said that, seeing the 2001 match with Booker T, I thought he looked sluggish. The match makes no sense because Buff immediately cuts off Booker T. Buff is the heel, by the way. And then the first move is a double underhook DDT, which he gets a near fall and then tries to go for another near fall in 30 seconds. And straight away, I know I was watching it on silent, but I just remember thinking, this is a really weirdly paced out match immediately. And I don't know if that's nerves or whatever it was, but they did at a house show in Spokane, Washington, wrestle each other one day beforehand, one day beforehand at a house show to sort of like tune up the thing. But I just thought as a match put together, it was weird enough. And then have WCW guys in as un-WCW town as you can get in mainland the United States as well. But as far as the match being put together, what did you think of it? Am I overanalyzing there?
No, you're not. What I feel like, and this is just me guessing, but being in that position, when you have basically creative freedom in WCW, so Bagwell and Booker T probably had creative freedom to put their match together how they wanted, paced how they wanted, and really just got the finish. If you think about it, the status they had in WCW was all but gone. So in WWF at the time, and even moving forward even more so, it's more of a controlled environment as far as the agent telling you we need this, we need that. It very much felt like, I might be wrong, it very much felt like that they were puppets and the puppeteers were telling them move for move how to do the match. That's what it felt like to me, that they were given and rehearsed the entire match to some degree. They probably filled in the blanks somewhere, but somebody had said, open the match up with this. Like they were designed to fail. This was booked to fail. Now, as far as going forward to fire Bagwell, I don't know if it was just all the other stuff around it and they just said, get this guy out of here, because he was a great talent. He was a great character on TV. Now, I've seen in catering, and it was during that time, Buff literally telling people all those things too. Now, other people can tell. It's Walter Payton. Walter Payton never needed to say how great he was because everybody else said how great he was. Bagwell's right. He was a great talent, a great character, looked great. He could be a top guy. But nobody likes anybody. Like if we just said every episode, hey, we have the greatest wrestling show on YouTube. We have the greatest wrestling show. It's like, yeah, we get it. That's for other people to decide, not us. So that could have been more, not the match was bad, maybe not even the fight with Shane Helms, but the overarching just personality conflicts and just the rumblings. And, dude, it's a wrestling locker room. What are they looking to do? They got nothing better to do than to pay attention to something they can sink their teeth into, somebody they can bury, and essentially you get rid of one of the guys that could potentially take a spot. He had the potential to do that. So I'm looking at everything. The match was an excuse designed to fail, booked to fail. But I think everything else personality-wise, and I think Mark would agree with that, really was the downfall at that time. Now, the weird thing is you go from WCW where his personality could be a little bit more forgiven, because think about it. How many years or decades was he in that system? Everybody knew
10.
him. They were familiar with him. Now you're literally starting over. How do you expect a guy to completely contain all of his natural personality, his comfort level within, what, less than a month?
No. That was 4 months.
Still, I mean, you're used to doing things a certain way. In this match here, you're used to, hey, I know how to work. If somebody told me right now, you have to go in there and cut this promo, and here's the sheet of paper and say every single word on it, I couldn't do it, because I'm used to talking and doing that kind of stuff in more of a free flow manner. If you give me bullet points, I could do it, but I can't go word for word because it's not me. It's not my voice. And dare I say it, this match was not their match. This was a match given to them to do, and puppeteers were having the puppets wrestle in the match they wanted to.
One more thing to add. Lance Storm was originally going to be the one to face Booker T, but then he was taken out because it was felt by the WWF higher-ups, whoever they may have been, that Buff Bagwell was the bigger name. Now, having said that, in WCW, as I say, I was watching every single week, one of the few people, comparatively, watching every single week. At that point in 2001, late 2000, Lance Storm was more over. He was, and also he was way more in shape, and one of the few good things of WCW in that last year, whereas Buff Bagwell, he'd cooled off with Scott Steiner. He wasn't associated with him anymore. He was with Lex Luger in a tag team that didn't really have much impact at the end. So you can always say hindsight 2020, Lance Storm was really probably the best guy to go in there with Booker T for that match. But who knows? He could have ended up being fired instead of Buff in that sense, because I don't think they were going to get rid of Booker T.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Maybe Buff was put into that match to seal the deal that was already on the way to doing it. It all happened very quickly. And take it from a guy that's made repeated mistakes within that company. The match with Tomko, which was years and worlds worse, whatever term you want to use, than that. That was a fireable match for both of us. No, we were set up to fail too, if you think about it, in every way possible. When somebody pulls granny panties out of their suit jacket, it throws you off. I should have known then about Vince. Should have been a clue. But you think about now maybe the fight with Shane Helms got him on the radar in a negative way. Maybe he got into a negative way from the simulcast. Maybe he said something or reacted a certain way to Shane McMahon or Bruce Pritchard. There's always people with their antennas up, and they do not forget. So it could have been that simulcast back in March that was the beginning of the end for Mark. I don't quite know. That's all pure speculation. But I do know it happened way too quick for a guy that was figured in that much in the WCW, even being cooled down. You're tagging up with Luger, you're tag champs, you're still figured in.
That's something we need to future episode, by the way, is
glug.
Lex Luger and Buff Bagwell versus, I think it's the Natural Born Thrillers, where, was it the last pay-per-view, Greed? And they put them over, I've got it here, 52 seconds, put them over, but they did it in the most obvious.
Bagwell and Luger put them over in 52 seconds?
Yeah, but you need to watch the match.
I'll watch
because
it.
There's something up with it.
So were they as Mike Sanders, my good friend Mike Sanders, awesome dude, were they SOL? And you know what that means.
I never knew what that meant. What does it mean?
S out of luck.
Thank you. Yeah, Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Hare, and apparently afterwards they got to the back and said, 52 seconds, that's all we could get out of them. So, which is not true. Anyway.
I tried, brother.
I tried, brother. Vince McMahon, after this match, decides that no one from WCW can work and scraps all plans of having a separate WCW roster, and then over the next few months that explains the booking going forward. Anyway, that's not the end for Buff Bagwell. We've got one more segment featuring
Can I give my theory about that?
Oh, go on.
You can already figure it out. So basically, from watching that one match, Vince said none of these guys can work and scrap the entire plans. So basically, It's kind of like creative has nothing for you and you get released, but not the writer.
Most likely.
What do you think about that? He already made his decision before that match even occurred.
It's confirmation bias. You know,
exactly.
He puts something out there to fail and then was angry that it failed, but blamed them and not himself.
He was more angry that they didn't have a bad match, but they created the bad match. They literally gaslit the entire wrestling fan base.
It wasn't a good match. It was a boring match for a main event. It wasn't a good match by any stretch of the imagination. I forgot what's that? It's not a bow and arrow where, you know, you put a knee in the back and you stretch their arms out to the back. That's even more boring than a sleeper somehow.
I've done that at Shane Helms a million times, so thank you very much. There's a way to get out of that to make it exciting, and you got to have a good set of heat before that, and you don't open up with a double arm DDT to start the match. That's what I mean.
Just that thing where you like stretch them out. It's like, just bend your arms or something, or roll through. I mean, it's like the easiest move in real life to get out of. I always hated that one.
Well, my arms. Do you really think I can power out of one of those?
Oh, but I mean, you can. Oh, forget it anyway. Let's
Hulk it up,
Buff Bagwell,
and then you get out of there.
And you have to do that for ages. Anyway. Buff Bagwell.
I used to shake Shane's arms. That's how much of a work it was. When I wanted him to come back, I would shake his arm. He'd laugh. He'd be like, I know when to do this.
Shane's going to be coming up in a little bit as well. And someone I've never interviewed that I would like to interview as well, by the way, Shane Helms. Throw now out there. Buff Bagwell, he does actually make one more appearance. Not on television, though, unless he does, as part of a group. Maybe he does. But anyway, the last we see of him, or the fans see of him, in the WWF is a post-SmackDown brawl between some of the WCW guys and WWF guys who come to run them out of the ring. Let's say this is Buff's very last appearance with the WWF. After that, he's fired, allegedly claimed that he was injured from said interaction, allegedly got his mother, Judy Bagwell, to, he's in school, get him out of doing house show matches or whatever else it was, and then basically he's let go. Having said that, let's see the Bradshaw beatdown of Buff Bagwell. So Stevie, over to you when you're ready.
So I have a question before this. This is the night after that Raw match, correct? So this is the next night, Tuesday taping for SmackDown, because he was released the next Monday at the Phillips Arena before Raw. Is my timeline correct with that?
Yeah, SmackDown was on Tuesdays recorded then, wasn't it?
Yes. Monday Raw,
yes.
Tuesday SmackDown. So this is the next night. This is after this, probably still. You get people emptying the hallway. You wonder why nobody's looking directly into your eye. You get these hints that you're not really figured in. And I'm sure Bagwell felt that way the next day, that they were gaslighting everybody into, this guy, everything. So let me play this right here. And we're going to show that Bradshaw is going to clothesline Bagwell right there. If you haven't seen it, we're going to go zoom in. Bam, right there. Now, mind you, I feel bad for Bagwell in this case because he's going to take the clothesline, which that's a short arm. That's not the worst John's ever threw. Those ones where you hit the corner and he comes with that can be pretty rough. But let's not forget that Bagwell had a very serious neck injury with that bulldog thing off the top rope from Steiner where he broke his neck, he couldn't feel anything, and he's taking this move, and then you had clued me in, he's going to take a pretty rough power bomb after this, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's play.
There are separate angles at the end of the video as well of both moves, so...
All right, so here's my theory. There's people standing all around the ring. This was supposed to be an all-out brawl with everybody, right? Everybody's supposed to brawl. Everything gets shut down. Everybody peels back to the ropes in the corners and basically leaves the APA here with Bagwell. That's it. They gave Stasiak like a spine buster. He has a whole nother set of heat on Stasiak for a bunch of different things. But right here, they cleared it. So this was not like anything less than planned. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And there's that horrible WCW logo. Forearm is just a Bradshaw forearm right there. But right here, they're not laying it in, but basically they're dressing him down in front of the world. They're making a point. Now you got Bob.
Because Bob Holly hits one punch and then he goes to throw a second one and then Buff's already gone down.
Now what I would say is what you're looking at right here, these three guys with the reputation of being locker room enforcers. So this is where I'm saying that this is planned. This is the office. This is WWF at the time saying, this is what we need done. This is the way we're booking. And for all I know, we have to ask Mark. He has a channel. I'm sure he'll comment on it. Did they not tell Mark that this is happening? Think about it. Did they say, we're all going to brawl and then we're going to spill out? And they basically grabbed a hold of him, clotheslined him, and then everybody backed up. And I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. I wasn't privy to any of this stuff, or else I would tell you. Yeah, they told all the boys, just stand around here and let it happen. So here's the Bob's punch. You're not going to see the actual punch because it's the camera angle is at Bob's back.
You see, he actually swings entirely for a second punch. So I think Buff took one of those and just went, F that, and went straight down for it.
Yeah, he didn't really sell. He just kind of collapsed and stayed down. I can see it on his face. He's kind of, when you're selling, you're more, like I said about Real Violence with the Mike Rotunda death row thing. Real Violence always looks very subdued and not as exciting as the simulated one. He's not selling. He's just down. He might be out right now. And he's
almost got like the hangdog expression, hasn't he? You know, the mouth open, the sort of,
just kind of like surreal, maybe a little bit of shock, like what's going on? It's not going the way that it was told. I don't know. They could have still planned to do this, but then we're a little rougher with him. Who knows? This is the powerbomb spot. Not terrible. Now here's the thing. Ron Farouk had his shoulders, but could have very easily did the Shaker Heights spike type thing and held onto his hair or his head to make sure he didn't tuck his chin. They kind of took care of him. I've seen way worse Bradshaw power bombs. Did they do it again?
I don't remember. I seem to remember the story going that they powerbombed him twice and knocked him out.
I don't remember. I think the clothesline might have knocked him a little silly. And then everything after that kind of...
At the end of the video, there's a better shot of the clothesline as well. Are they leaving now? Or are they giving him one more?
They're giving him one more.
Now, is this the one where he...
Throwing him out. That's fine. They throw him out, and there he is right there.
Okay, if you skip to something like 5 minutes or something, that's where you can see the clothesline again. It's weird seeing Raven with the WWF crew, because he would be the ECW crew very shortly afterwards. There we go. This is where the clothesline is. Just prior. With S.A. Rios getting in the way of all people. And Ron Killings, in fact. There you go.
Yeah.
Our truth.
I've taken worse clotheslines from Bradshaw. It's there. Now, Bagwell may have never, ever felt like that, clothesline like that in his life. So he might not have been prepared for, like I said, John's a monster. He's a big dude. He's coming at you. If you look at his face, you see that face as this is coming, it scares you. Anybody that stands there and doesn't do this, you're a brave man. But he probably hadn't felt anything that heavy. And of course, he has a history of a neck injury. It's something it takes a long time to recover from. So he could still be kind of very delicate with his neck. So he's taking this and then the power bomb right here. that powerbomb was fine. Now it's going to knock the wind out of you. It's not like an easy thing. Ron guided him down, but then nothing to where, see, it's basically flat back, not a high back neck to, you've seen Bradshaw do it where the guy whips down. Like, I think he did one to Taka Michinoku that was like, oh my God, like just folded him. So, but I think he's kind of out. What the S.A. Rios, come on, man, trying to get yourself over. S.A. Rios, come on, Micah. Come on, Micah. Remember that story?
Yeah, did you tell that on the show? Or
I did.
After?
I told him one time he was just steaming my shirt when I was right to censor guy. I steam your shirt, Michael. I steam your shirt. It's like, what is going on?
It's such an odd conglomerate of WWF guys as well. Haku. That must have been one of his last things. Or he may have been there after the invasion briefly.
Haku's there?
Yeah, that's him next to Bradshaw with the WWF t-shirt.
Well, one thing, I would take the APA over Haku. Come get me, guys. Give me another clothesline. All right, so that's it right there.
I know Jerry Lynn's hanging about there, who I'm interviewing in a few days.
Raven is really a strange one. But this is the invasion of WCW, but before the amazing alliance, which I'm sure is an entire episode. But I don't see the clothesline, and even I think this was more a creative message to Bagwell that you're the guy. They sacrificed him as whatever, and this was the last we were going to see of Bagwell. Do I think they were planning to release him? I don't know. The way they treated him here and the way they treated him the night before that they threw him out of the building last, I think they already planned that he wasn't going to do anything. And if he was going to do anything, he was going to do stuff like this. And that's it. Which Bagwell would have probably protested doing jobs and other stuff, or at least voiced his concern about, hey, I'm a top guy or I'm a star. And he was. He was a top character. He was a top talent. And to do this is quite a shock. So that's what I think. But as far as them trying to rough him up with this, it's not light. It's not easy to take. You're going to get the wind knocked out of you. You may get knocked silly from the clothesline. But I don't see anything like where they tried to hurt the guy.
Maybe it was the Bob Holly punch that we didn't see. Could have been that in the end.
Now here's my speculative theory on that. Because I think WWE does nothing on purpose or nothing by accident. Everything on purpose. They're way too smart. Do you think they purposely shot the camera from Bob's back to not show that Bob laid in a punch? Or you think it was just there?
It's a battle royal. I don't think you can. There's so many bodies there anyway. I just don't think you can.
You just can't leave any theory out when it comes to this company. They paid anywhere from $4 to $10 million for WCW only to destroy it, and acted like, oh, Vince, none of these guys can work, but we'll keep this guy because we like Booker T. So if none of the guys can work, why did you keep everybody pretty much besides Buff Bagwell?
Mike Awesome. And did they get rid of Canyon afterwards? No, I don't think they did either. We'll move on very quickly. In the locker room, I've heard more than one instance from WCW guys at the time saying they felt they were targeted or ostracized by the WWF locker room, which is sort of stupid in a way because they're all WWF now. Just because they're wearing T-shirts with a different logo, they're all hired by Vince. Anyway, they were made to wear those ugly WCW T-shirts, and they basically felt that they were targeted. They were the outsiders still, and a lot of the WWF guys didn't treat them very well. Is that anything you can attest to, that they were treated as pariahs at the time?
Yeah, I can see that. It's very weird because the business is a brotherhood. It's the business. There's just like when they were telling WWE talent not to hang around TNA or AEW talent. I don't know if they still do that, but it's like everybody knows everybody. It's a lot smaller of a circle, a lot smaller of a world and an ecosystem than people realize. So, but I think everybody bought into it, or maybe people were just overcompensating because Vince really, I go back to it, Vince was carrying that chip on his shoulder and nobody wanted to speak up because everybody was walking on eggshells. So I think it was over performative to treat them like outsiders, to be loyal to WWF and let the office know that we're loyal to this company. Where it's the only place to work. So, of course, we're loyal to this company.
Right, we shall move on now. So I'm wondering if people are thinking, well, hang on, why are we not hearing about Stevie Richards in the InVasion angle? And that is pretty much because you were gone for most of 2001 after Right to Censor was removed from existence pretty much at the end of April of 2001. So, excuse me, I'm wheezing now. You go to MCW for a bit. You do a couple of shots in the WWE, one against Taz that went 13 seconds. I did actually watch, but we're not going to talk about that for now. Sunday Night Heat randomly, a couple with Perry Saturn, a couple of Jacked. And then you return as Stephen Richards once again, and all of a sudden you're managing a tag team from WCW that had just debuted with the company, both former WWF wrestlers, Kronik, Bryan Adams, and Brian Clark, better known as Crush and Adam Bomb in the WWF at least. What was your first realization that you were being brought back as a sort of half different character to what you were before, and you were going to be used in a managerial capacity?
Well, I want to refer back to that Mike Rotunda segment, more specifically what JR said about Mike Rotunda, and they were trying to find things to do with him, but you just can't keep bringing a guy out every single week with a different gimmick or pivoting that quickly. So I knew I had to be cooled down, go out in the desert for a while. I had the black outfit, which was like basically a spin-off of the Right to Censor outfit. Of course, I did some quick, enhancement work, we would say, some quick jobs in the Right to Censor outfit, and then a black shirt, a black dress shirt. That was the Taz match where I got beat in the Garden in 13 seconds. And that should have been it, because there wasn't nothing to sink your teeth into with my character. I was in that proverbial desert. And then I believe, because Taker and Bryan Adams were really close friends, I think they wanted to do something with Kronik, because Kronik looked like more like WWE wrestlers than WCW wrestlers back then. They looked like they had that presentation for the big Hollywood marquee type of look of a pro wrestler. So they knew I could talk, and they knew they could plug me into something. Now, I don't think they intended to have Kronik released so quickly after that Unforgiven match. It was literally the next day, which once again, I believe the next day of Raw was Cleveland, Ohio, where JR came up to me after that. And I remember it was like the metal railings on the way to catering. And he stopped me and he said, we're letting these guys go, but we're eventually going to have something for you. Just hang tight. And that was it. So when it was sprung upon me, I think it was literally that day when I had the Taker promo and they jumped out and they debuted. That's the first I heard of it. So they brought me into TV. They brought me into TV like any other time they brought me into TV, but I was doing this instead of putting somebody over in 13 seconds.
Just looking, Columbus, Ohio, the next day.
Columbus.
Well remembered,
sorry.
Stevie. Pittsburgh, PA, Mellon Arena. That was Unforgiven 01. There is a few weeks sort of build up with Kronik, as you rightly remembered, for the Patreon. Subscribers, by the way, a shout out to that. We actually watched the entire match through, including the promo beforehand as well, where you claimed that The Undertaker said your name was such disgust.
It was almost real.
With that being said, we'll get to the match in a second then. Did you think it was a good fit, you and Kronik?
Yeah, I mean, anytime I have an opportunity, and me being a manager, like I talked about the greatest managers, please watch that in the last episode. We have the clip up. See, I'm always trying to weave it in. Total views, watch time. But I had the ability in this vein to not be the Right to Censor, where I had to be kind of at the forefront. And when you put me in the background, it looked like you were taking something away from me. I was more than happy to be in the background, let them get over, help them get over, and also protect them from doing jobs, taking bumps. There was a whole dynamic that wasn't even touched upon. Beat Kronik at 5 minutes with me, the old Memphis thing. 6-man tag, I do the job. I mean, it could be anything. They never scratched the surface of the potential that we could have done. And once again, we watched the Unforgiven match back, and I'm like, it's not that bad of a match. It's crazy. The pacing is very off-putting, the pacing slow. The comeback, which should be the fastest part of the match, was slower than the shine and the heat. You know, we talked about it on the Patreon. Taker screaming, feed. Like, that shows the frustration, and that was the beginning of the end. Now, like, we didn't know the end was going to be like that next day. And I reconnected with Brian Clark, and he's never really in detail spoken about it or their side of it. And of course, Brian Adams is gone, so rest in peace. But I don't know if it was right after the match, if it was the next morning, if they got to the building for the next day. I don't know when they were released. I do know when in Gorilla, it was pretty awkward. Not a lot of words. Taker, that look you saw at the end of the match was the look in Gorilla. It wasn't emptied like the after the chair shot. It wasn't an empty Gorilla, but it was very. I just went up to him. I went up to Taker, Kane, and both guys in Kronik, thanked all of them, and then just walked off because I had nothing. You know what I mean? That was between those guys. So I don't know what happened after that.
Before we get to the match itself, you changed your look a little bit for this run, did you not?
Yeah, I dyed my hair black because their hair was black. Hey, you got black hair and you got black hair. Like, smartass. So, Bruce, to his credit, it was a rib, I think. Bruce, after I dyed it permanently black, because why not go big or go home, right? I mean, you're not going to release these guys tomorrow. I think I might even said that. Sorry. I jinxed him. But he was like, after the fact, hey, you could have just did a temporary dye. What are you doing? And whatever. To me, it was like, you want the character change. You want me to manage these guys. I'm going to dye my hair. I never thought I was going to grow my hair out again. So what am I going to do? Just shave it all off again or let it grow out back to dark brown, which isn't much different than it was. It was just jet black because that's what they did. They dyed their hair that dark.
You must have been thinking. I remember we said a few weeks ago, you know, nicest wrestlers, and I said Undertaker, and you just went, I don't know. Never really spoke to him afterwards. But damn, in 2001, you worked with Undertaker a lot, with Right to Censor, then with Kronik as well, and then a couple of other times, I guess, here and there.
Yeah, but never had a personal conversation with him. Never had one. I think the only personal conversation I ever had with him. Because at one point he got jacked. And this was after all this, by the way. So this is when I guess I was kind of, you know, out of the desert, out of the doghouse for the most part with The Office and other talent. But we always had like, you know, I never seeked out. There was a time in my career where I did seek out the people to try to gain approval if they didn't really care for me or whatever. But at this point, I just kind of like in passing. But I remember he got really jacked at one point. Multiple times in his career, but this was one time where I said, hey man, you're getting even more jacked than the last time I saw you. And he goes, yeah, you know, Mama's taking all the candy and the junk food and the chips out of the cabinet. And that was it. That was about it. One other time he gave me advice, I think in Puerto Rico, I did something and he was like, hey, instead of throwing like 3 or 4, just throw one good one here. And I was like, oh, cool. Thank you. Anything else you see? And he was like, nah. And I was like, all right, cool. Thanks, man. That's all I can remember. That's it.
As far as the match itself, you already said, you know, they got fired the next day. Undertaker was very unhappy. He yells feed quite late on, you know, during the comeback. It's funny, just before that, Kane sort of gets the hot tag and then sort of hot tags right back out again after like 30 seconds.
Not even a double down. It was like, let's get it over with. That's what I saw when I watched it. They might have had their time cut too. There might have been somebody in Gorilla said, cut the time. This is not going the way we want it to. Something to that effect.
And then the referee just tells them mid-match, speed this up, guys.
Yep. That's. I mean, Glenn went from a double clothesline, double down to tagging right away. When 2 guys got him, you know, it was weird.
Throughout the match, then, what were your takeaways as far as the pacing? How bad was it really? Where did it go wrong? Where was it not that bad? What do you think?
Well, I think it's more of the clashing of exact similar styles. Talked about it. You have 4 guys, same size, same. You can determine their scale of athletic ability. Who is more athletic than one guy or whatever. but it was definitely something to where it was glaringly obvious that you have four big guys in the ring moving at the same gear, at the same speed, with the same almost move sets. And that right there, I also said maybe they have enough time to train in a bigger ring, a stiffer ring. Bumping in that ring is no joke. Also, I do really speculate that Kronik was never put in a position to bump and feed, to sell. Their WCW run was right up there with Goldberg's of just squashing people or short matches. And this match was, I think the match was like 12 minutes maybe. It's a long match in a different ring, in a stiffer ring. You're in a new company. You're throwing right in there. You're literally throwing right into it. You have one enhancement match, maybe two. You said a house show too, but they lost that match on the house show, right? To Albert and Kane.
Yeah.
I wasn't there for that, but essentially 2 or 3 TV appearances before the pay-per-view match, and that's it. That's a lot of pressure on these guys that don't have the conditioning to work a 12-minute match right off the bat.
There was one bit where I was thinking, obviously, after the facts, like the Buff Bagwell Booker T match, this match was absolutely terrible, etc. And it really isn't as bad as it's sort of painted out to be. It's sort of revisionist history in that sense. And I think this match is the same. It's just a bit of a clumsy match, really. Nothing too terrible. But the other thing revisionist history will say is that Kronik should get all the blame for this. I don't think The Undertaker does that well, really, either. There was one bit in the match where he throws a knee, but he doesn't put Crush's head down, Brian Adams' head down to sort of take the knee. So all Undertaker does is just hold the back of his neck, raises his knee, and then just moves on to the next thing.
Listen, by that much.
Yeah, you could put an entire leg in the space that was missing. But there's just a couple of bits of miscommunication. Is this Undertaker's fault at any point here, do you think, or is it Kronik deserves all the blame?
No, I think whoever's in the match, including myself, deserved the blame. We all take equal blame for a match. It's a cooperative effort. It's not like a quarterback passing to a wide receiver and the wide receiver constantly drops it. That's on the receiver. But if the quarterback is throwing and never even comes within the catch radius of a wide receiver, it's quarterback's fault. But what do? The quarterback and the wide receiver are going to take equal blame no matter what. That's what I just think. I'm saying in this case, it really is cooperative and everybody should take equal blame for it. But here's where wrestling politics comes into play. Kane and Undertaker are figured in, but they have proven themselves. They've paid their dues. They're in that company and have the cachet for a reason. But nobody who doesn't want to commit political suicide as a talent and agent in the office to say, well, Undertaker and Kane are just much to blame. Your career is over. So that's what I think. But in essence, everybody could take equal blame for that. Now, when it comes to the comeback, when you're shouting feed and these guys are, not bumping and feeding, but then again, they're 6-foot+ guys, 250, 300 pounds. They're jacked. Taker called them statues before the match even was out there. So maybe he already knew we can't do a whole lot with them. But then again, here's the other person, the sixth person. So you got 4 guys in the ring. Me, that's 5. Sixth person, or the sixth entity that's to blame, is for the WWE to book this to fail. That's the thing. You can only be booked a certain way. You don't go out there and say, oh, I can do this, this, and this, and let's do this. No. You have to play within the guidelines that the WWE presents you as. So they could have booked to their strengths and hid their weaknesses. What did they do? They booked them in a long match that exposed all their weaknesses and also, dare I say, exposed Undertaker and Kane's weaknesses as well.
Brian Clark would only wrestle for one WWE pay-per-view after this, and then a few matches as Kronik in All Japan, and then he just retired. I guess. If I was going to ascribe more blame, not that it's my position to, but Brian Adams looked more tired than Brian Clark through that. Brian Clark was doing more athletic stuff. He looked sharper, had a good tan on him and the whole thing. Bryan Adams did look more sluggish, in my opinion, and I think the majority of things that went wrong was when he was in the ring. For my eyes only. You tell me if you think I'm off base with that. But post-match...
Brian's always had that style, though. Bryan Adams, as Crush, even. He
never did anything for me, Crush. That's the thing. I mean, I was a fan all in the 90s and stuff. He never did anything for me. He was just a big dude.
But he could work, and he wasn't stiff, and he could do stuff. It's just you have to accentuate the strengths and hide the weaknesses. In other words, his match with Randy Savage at WrestleMania and that one where Crush was tied upside down and back, you love that match, right?
Yeah, but that's Savage.
Yeah, but that's
name a bad Savage match.
They booked him with a smaller guy that could work around him and make him look like a monster. He's not the only one. If you book Taker, all right, let me look at it this way. Taker versus Johnny Gonzalez. Taker versus Big Show. Even Taker versus Kane at the first WrestleMania, they had a match. Taker and Kane at WrestleMania in Boston, I believe it was WrestleMania 14. Their match was very clumsy in some regards too, and very off. They needed to get their chemistry down. They didn't fire Kane after that because they believed in the gimmick.
Would the WWF, I know it's hard to say right or not, but I mean, should they have given Kronik more time, really? Because honestly, it wasn't that bad. I'm sure that they could have, played a part into 2002 as a tag team.
I think they could have given Kronik a more of a probationary period after that to see if they could gel with the tag teams, have good matches. But if I'm looking at it objectively, I would be right there with you. I'd say eventually Brian Clark is going to break away as a singles guy because he's got still a little bit more athleticism to him, and he can work some of the smaller guys and make some of the bigger guys look good too. He would have had a good spot. Bryan Adams, I think, I don't know. He politically and obviously personally, because him and Taker are friends, may have been figured in longer than he should have if you looked at it objectively. But Kronik should have had another 6 months to at least put other tag teams over on the way out. They didn't even get that from them.
Post-match stuff, you've said this before, that some or not all of it with you being involved was called on the spur of the moment.
I believe the choke slam, if I recall correctly, because I remember standing there and the match happened and I said, and somebody might have told me grab a chair or something or whatever, but I grabbed the chair, came in and did that, and then did the old thing where I backed up in the Glen, Kane, and started doing that, grabbing it, took the choke slam. The only reason I remember it possibly being an audible to some extent was Glenn put it over to me after the fact, like that was really like smart thinking on your feet to do that. That's the only reason I remember it, because when I look back, I'm like, that had to be set up that way. But I just felt like the way Taker was yelling and the way the pacing was and how everybody kind of seemed off, I don't know if they were supposed to get to me, but I said this might be the only thing that kind of saves the match, at least in some regard, or maybe keeps the act going because at least they got to me. I don't know. Whatever I was doing instinctively, I got in the ring, it happened, and that was the end of it.
So, we have the Survivor Series. You're in the Battle Royal that's won by Test, I believe, the Immunity Battle Royal, and then the Invasion is over. Sort of, dragged out the back into the shed and had its head blown off. It was a mercy killing for that story, let me tell you. Awful. And then, anyway, I could go on about it so much. And then with 2002, they seem to get back on the right track for a little bit. They bring back Mr. Perfect. Where was Kurt Hennig, for goodness sake? I didn't even put him on this. But Kurt Hennig and Val Venus comes back, and The Godfather comes back, and Goldust comes back, and then you've got the most star power I think WWF ever had at one time in early 2002. Because Hogan and the Outsiders come back, and it seemed to be a really good time for a bit.
And business kept slowly going down, no matter what.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, Flair returned after an absence of nearly 9 years, and Goldberg would turn up soon, and Scott Steiner would turn up at the end of the year. And
You had The Rock. Yeah,
yeah, The Rock was still there. Steve Austin was still there, and wrestling. Just
well, don't leave out Brock Lesnar coming into the fold not long after that.
Yeah, Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle. I even wrote down an entire list of them somewhere, of just almost like an embarrassment of riches, and they couldn't capitalize on it. So what do? Split the roster, and there you go. I mean, crikey, your Benoits and your Eddie Guerreros as well were there. Who else, for goodness sake? Triple H, Shawn Michaels came back in 2002. I mean, what a year. What a year for star power, and how they managed to ruin that with the invasion and just kill people's interest for good. I will never, ever figure that one out.
It takes a lot of hard work and effort to do that.
Well, yeah. I mean, don't get me started. Anyway, we're going to end on...
All right, let's stop. We need an intervention right here. Okay. So 14-year-old James, I need to talk to 14-year-old James for at least 90 seconds. Okay. Hold on a second. Tell me on the flight yoke where they touched you.
Right on the starter button.
Now I can write off the flight. Yeah, I can write off the flight yoke. Yeah, now I used it twice in a bit.
Honestly, I'd be pressing eject. I ejected out of being a super fan at that time. Let me tell you.
Do you know what they did? You have PTSD from this. I can tell.
I'm still upset. And do you know what really, really got me? And you'll appreciate this. What killed my interest watching Weekly was in 2006, where they ruined the ECW invasion and the WWE ECW, because I just thought, well, that's it. That's the final straw. And I stopped. I never saw pretty much anything from 2006 to like 2010 or 2007 to 2010. I just dipped in and out from then, and I started watching again later on down the line. But man, they killed my interest with like the two worst invasions they could have possibly scripted out.
So what you're telling me is this an AEW or TNA invasion may not work out so well in the future.
Lord, I tell you. Oh, the TNA ECW one was disgraceful as well. Another episode.
Hardcore Justice. I called it Flavor of the Month.
Here it comes. It's cojones.
Here we have Tyrod Rotten, not Axel Rotten.
Is that what they called him?
No, they should have, though. That would have been
they should have done. Damn. If you had told me that with a straighter face, you would have had me hook, line, and sinker.
That's how much wrestling companies destroy like dreams, because I just gave something off the top of my head. You're like, wow, I can't believe they did that, because they've done it and they will again.
Man, right? Okay, we should have like a write-in, but we've got nowhere to write in. But I think is TNA Hardcore Justice going to be something that people want to see? Because there's I don't know if it's Marky D or Wrestling Bios, one of those two. I think it was Marky D. Did a retrospective of around that time and why the ECW EV2 thing didn't work. And there's a shot of four guys in the ring. I can't remember one of them, but then there's some guy. There is Tommy Dreamer, there is Raven, and there is you. And you're the only one who looks, tanned and in shape and ready to go.
Was it Sabu or Rhino? The other guy.
If it was Rhino, he would have looked in shape.
Yeah.
I just remember looking at you and just thinking, well, you look like the only guy ready to go.
Yeah. Well, here's a preview or a spoiler. I hated it. Hated every second of it and didn't want to do it. So then if people want to see it based on that, which negativity sells sometimes, but it's the truth. I was really unhappy and disappointed with that. I did not want to be a part of that group.
I don't blame you. Anyway, let's move on. We're going to do our final... Well, we may do Botch Watch at some point. We'll see how...
That's a great name for a segment. Botch Watch.
I came up with that years ago and then I never used it.
Let's get a Sasquatch walking across with Botch on a Botch necklace like Flavor Flav. Botch Watch, yes.
Okay, so I had Botch Watch.
Fafo. Can't say the full.
We had Botch Watch, or I made up Botch Watch and Botch Along. So either way, which works for you, we'll do that.
Community post, right? Which would they prefer? But now we have what went wrong, what went right, Fafo, which we can't say the first F, something around, find out.
F around, find out.
Oh, I love it.
And then Botch Watch.
We didn't get limited ads on that because I said it, right?
No, God. Oh, yeah. No, the Shake Height Spike video got limited ads for about 3,000 views, and we couldn't work out why, but I reapplied. It was fine. But the joys of working through YouTube. Anyway, we're going to do Nicest Wrestlers. It was a segment that did quite well for us in a previous video, so I thought we'd bring it back. But this time, it's going to be a WCW InVasion edition. Now, do you want me to read out the names of some of the guys that weren't brought along? Or is that sort of a waste of time? And we'll just do
I think guys that are, well, guys not picked up. Yeah, I would. Yeah, because a couple of these guys I know. So that would be good. One of them I just talked to, actually. I just talked to and apologize for stealing his show once again.
Well, out of the names that I've listed, because you've got the names as well, of the people who you can speak about, of the guys not picked up by the WWF, who do you want to talk about apart from Shane?
Well, I can talk about the other two. I have limited dealings. I have more dealings with one of them.
Well, the other two, I've got about 8.
Oh, I've dealt with. Let's do only the 3 up top.
Only the 3 up top, and then we'll end on Shane. Okay, then. So a couple of the people that we did not, WWF did not bring in to the WWF or WWE until very, very lately. Jeff Jarrett. We'll talk about him in a second. But first off, Lex Luger.
It depends on which version. The Lex Luger that I knew in WCW in '97 for the short time, my run, I'm using air quotes, in WCW, very condescending, very arrogant, would be nice to you, but those backhanded compliments. Oh, I think it's great what you guys do. And you, hey, you. My name's Stevie Richards. Oh, I knew that. You. And just, Lex had a reputation before when he got sick, and all that, everything happened. But now Lex, I talk to Swinger all the time. He talks to Lex a lot. I've bumped into Lex a couple times, and he's been nothing but gracious. And really a turnaround story as far as being now, I believe, one of the nicest guys. He's not really in the business. He's been in the real world for quite some time. He's obviously had a newfound perspective, almost a forced one when he got sick. And somebody who loves life now, has like somebody who is making so much money and had every opportunity and every luxury in the world, seemingly never happy with it. I mean, it's a tale as old as time. Then you get humbled and these things happen and you realize how thankful and grateful you just need to be, for being alive. And I get that impression. I haven't seen Lex in years, but Lex is definitely somebody I consider a nice guy. Where would I consider him to be? Probably in the B category because I don't know him that well. So we're friendly, but not friends.
Next one on the list, by the way, we're ranking this A, B, C, D. I actually got it right this time.
And do you remember last week? Do you have an S version or a Mount Rushmore of nice guys?
No, because I think we'd have to amalgamate the Mount Rushmore of nice guys until we do like every single company forever.
Okay.
I think. So we'll do that for later.
A through D.
We'll do A through D for this one. Next one, Jeff Jarrett.
Jeff Jarrett, my cardio buddy. We text each other pictures of cardio and everything once in a while. Jeff is somebody that when I worked at TNA had very limited interaction with him. I always wanted to work Jeff Jarrett. He's probably one of the safest workers out there. It's just a bucket list item that somebody, people may not even know that this guy was back in Memphis in the mid to late 80s when he started, something like that.
Started 16.
Started at 16. He also was part of that Texas-Tennessee rivalry between World Class, and they did a talent exchange at one point. Jeff was somebody, I love telling him this, I grew up watching Jeff Jarrett. How's that? So, but I always wanted to work Jeff. There was something about a bucket list thing for me to work an old school Memphis wrestler. Like when I got to work Lawler, it was like, the matches weren't what I wanted to be. I wanted more of a storyline. The Right to Censor one didn't really climax into a match I was satisfied with. We can always talk about that individually. That was a hell of a night. But Jeff is somebody I always wanted to work because athletically mixed with the safety factor, the promos, and obviously in TNA, he's the booker. He's one of the creative people. If I'm figured into a storyline with Jeff Jarrett, I'm getting booked, I'm getting on TV, and I can do some cool stuff. And also trying to learn psychology to be a better worker from Jeff would have been awesome. So, but as far as nice, he's never been anything but nice to me, but he's also very, very political, very, very smart. That Southern gentleman type of presentation got him very far in the business. Most of it is genuine, but Jeff is also somebody that when he doesn't like something, I've seen Jeff Jarrett angry, and that's not a good thing to see. So never been angry at me, always been cool, and I consider him now to be between friendly and a friend because we text pretty often about things that have nothing to do with wrestling, mostly working out, mostly pictures of treadmills and ellipticals and, wake up, I've been up for 7 hours, things like that. It's amazing when the business is removed from interactions. Usually people are pretty cool. The business makes people, it poisons people in a lot of ways.
Ranking?
Once again, a B. Because we never had a chance to be that tight to be an A, but very friendly from time to time. I've never had a crossword with him. If I did, he would let me know. He's not one of those guys.
And last one on the guys not picked up by the WWF, Shane Douglas.
He's an A. Absolute A.
D.
I would pair,
Boo. I'm just kidding.
I would pair Shane with being very nice, being a friend throughout the decades. And also he has a place in my heart because Shane, and I said it before, grabbed the microphone. At first he requested to work me because he really believed I would make him look good. This is in the beginning of my ECW, time. This is before any kind of run when I was just putting guys over. But Shane grabbed the microphone and gave me a very strong promo, words of encouragement that I would be a future star in the business. And that motivated and inspired me to try to be one. But now, decades later, Shane is not only a friend, but he's a guy that I always appreciated because he would tell the truth. He would give you his honest opinion. And that's why he was not picked up by WWE.
Yeah.
So that's probably it right there. Because his last night in WWE, he's documented it on Franchise University. That's probably why he didn't get picked up. He's the one that got heat because Vince wanted him to wrestle with a broken back. That's wrestling.
Now of the guys who were picked up by the WWF/WWE, because a few of these guys I've lumped in from later Turner broadcast contract. Is it Turner Home Movies who were contract? Anyway, whatever. Some guys weren't part of the invasion but came in the next year or so. And the first one is, we were talking about him with Buff Bagwell. I believe you've worked him in singles as well, Booker T. Yeah, we said Shane for A, didn't we? Yeah. Booker T, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Booker T and I worked a bunch, especially during the hardcore title stuff. He had one of my favorite matches at Insurrection in England right before the plane ride from hell. So Booker is very boisterous. He's, people could say he's a loudmouth and he's, just out there. But I've always enjoyed Booker, and at least Booker gives, I've never been in one, but he gave very much an NFL locker room type of loud and kind of busting each other's balls, chopping it up, stuff like that. I never took Booker's making fun of people seriously because Booker makes fun of himself. The commentary on dark matches and on heat velocity and all that stuff. He's always been a great guy to have in the locker room in that regard. Friendly, but not friends. And that's not a dig. This is just the A category, much like the managers. These are people I really do know on a personal level. So I would put him at a B, too, with that. I would say professional friendliness and professional courtesy, and also to be able to kind of give barbs back and forth in a friendly way.
Shane Helms.
Shane's somebody I worked an awful lot, but also traveled with as far as being on flights near each other, not driving. As a matter of fact, when we see each other, because he used to be the superhero and I was the villain, we would joke about that. I would do a thumbs down, he would do a thumbs up, and they would start and stop us a lot. We wanted to work together in an angle. So we used to joke around all the time with what happened to this? And we would do the thing and join thumbs up, thumbs down like that. I would call Shane an A because I did get to know him on a personal level, not hanging out outside, but spending a lot more time with him than, say, a Booker T in the locker room and stuff like that.
Lance Storm.
Lance is somebody, I think Lance I can identify with a lot as far as, I guess, personality outside the business and just kind of loving to work out. Shane is too, but Lance is a workout fiend. He's a gym rat. He loves working out, keeping himself in shape. Probably still looks the same as he did when he worked. But there's going to be a lot of B's because I'm friendly, but I was never really close friends with Lance. So I would give it a B.
Rhino. Now, I mentioned Rhino because I think Rhino went into ECW after you left.
Yeah.
If I'm right there. So you wouldn't have got to know him in ECW, so part of the invasion, for the most part.
Well, and also Rhino and I in TNA. Rhino and I worked in Extreme Rising, and he put me over in the tournament final. But I never really got to know him too well. I would still put him in a B because we spent a lot of time in pre-tapes and everything, but never outside. And like I said, nicest wrestlers is also the relationship I had with these guys in and out of the ring. And that kind of rates it higher or lower.
Should we define at this point? So A is unbelievably nice, B is pretty cool dude, C is maybe you didn't really know them that much, or just even-keeled, and D, bit of a butthole. Are we happy with that for a ranking?
A would be they were my friends outside the business.
Yeah. Okay. Next one, Tajiri.
He's a C. I never, outside of working him once or twice, never had a conversation with him.
Okay. Next one, Norman Smiley. I don't think he ever wrestled for WWF, WWE on
But
television,
I ran into him when he coached the Performance Center. Yeah. And once again, strictly nice guy, he would be an A. I don't know him that well, so I put him at a B. But he has definitely got a reputation for being one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet in the business. And here's not a surprise if you know the real nice guys in the business, the humble guys, are the shooters. And he's a shooter.
Mm-hmm. English as well, isn't he?
Yes. No. Is he? Yeah, I believe.
Or did he go to America when he was fairly young?
He hasn't. Still somewhat of an accent. You're right. I couldn't quite put my finger on it.
Jazz.
Jazz is an A. She's an A. Her and Rodney Mack. Super friendly, super nice. We worked together before. She was Victoria before Victoria. I teamed up with Jazz. Mm-hmm. That's when she helped me win the hardcore title, but super nice, underrated as far as her mind and Rodney Mack's mind for the business and what she could do. I was happy to see her in that three-way match at WrestleMania 19, her, Trish, and Victoria. So I wish there was more of a story with Victoria and Jazz, with me kind of in the middle as the valet. We never really kind of, examined that kind of storyline. But yeah, her and Rodney together are A's.
Bill Goldberg, strictly outside the ring and not headbutting lockers.
He's an A. Always been nice. If you're not talking about wrestling, if you're just talking about working out. I remember one time in Atlanta, we had a connecting flight. And I didn't even know this service existed. That's where I was at. I didn't even know first class existed or economy comfort for that matter. So we had a connection. We came off the connection and Bill was on the same flight. And I remember I only had like 20 minutes to get all the way across Atlanta airport. And Bill's like taking some secret door. Like he came out the gate and then made a U-turn. And I said, "Where are you going, Bill? Like the gate's this way." And he goes, "Oh, Delta has a service that shuttles you." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." I go, "Oh, good for you, dude." He goes, "Come on, let's go." So we go, and there's a Porsche waiting for us. And this car went vroom, like, yeah, better than your Jag, as you would say.
It is now. Did you see that?
Oh, I saw it. I watched it 100 times.
God,
congratulations.
Fire.
They should sell a lot of cars now. So, but he didn't need to do that. And then, like, we're talking in the car for I guess, felt like probably maybe a 45-second ride. That dude was going 100 miles an hour. And I was like, "Dude, that was very kind of you. You didn't need to do that." He goes, "Dude, you put me over. You make me look like $1 million, and you're just a good kid." because I'm so much younger than him. And I said, well, I appreciate that. That's kind of stuff that, and obviously Goldberg gets labeled as a mark. But I saw through and I heard his interviews where a lot of his character, he believed in being a role model for children. And you got to give him credit for that, to try to be just something that children watching can be inspired, motivated, and really be like, oh, that's a hero. That's cool. And we're so cynical in the business. Like, no kids watch that, but we were kids, right? We watched wrestlers and said, that's my hero. I want to be that person. So he gets a bad rap. And of course, Brett disagrees. I'm sure Brett thinks he's a D or an E or a Z, but I put him in the A category.
Next one, Shannon Moore.
He's an A. Shannon, they got to know pretty well. Shannon's a good dude. He's really nice. And I don't know what he's up to now, but I hope he's doing well. Just a nice dude. And also, when he was with Matt Hardy and did the Moron. No, that Moron. Well, who's Moron? Was Moron Crash? Crash was with him too.
Yeah.
Who was Shannon? Well, what did he call him? He was something.
I know it was Matt Hardy version 1, but I can't remember.
Crash was a moron because he was Shannon's lackey and Shannon was Matt Hardy's lackey. Yeah, Shannon's a good dude.
I completely forgot about Crash being there. Chuck Palumbo.
He's another A. Solid dude. Nice dude. I can't say any more than that. Chuck was a nice dude. I didn't have too much in common with him because he worked on motorcycles and stuff and he had his own business out in San Diego. Hopefully he still does. But I remember Chuck asking me some questions about, he wanted to be Chucky P one time and he was trying to find himself, especially after Billy and Chuck. And I think we had a match where he's Chucky P and we're trying to get it over on Heat. But we used to, talk about stuff like that and talk about things outside of wrestling. And that's what I appreciated.
Next one, Billy Kidman. Now, I just want to say this. Billy Kidman turns up to the WWE for like a few years, and then he has a very long career as a producer, agent, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. A C. I don't know Billy Kidman from anybody. Very limited interaction.
Oh, so you never produced a match of yours or anything then?
No, unfortunately, Jamie Noble did and threw me under the bus. We talked about that.
Future episode.
We talked about that in the interview, WSI.
Do we?
Yeah.
Jamie Noble.
All right, we need our intervention with the UFCT. We need to do impact testing. Well, look at the thing. Which finger? How many am I holding up? Oh, how many am I holding up?
Man, don't ask me to remember anything, honestly. Mark Jindrak.
I'd give him a B, but a high B because we knew each other here and there. He was Randy Orton's best friend and travel buddy. But in Lucha Libre USA, we got to know each other a little bit better. We had a match together in there, and we talked a little bit more, but never really hung outside the ring with him. So really nice dude, a really solid dude. But yeah, I'd give it a B.
Rey Mysterio.
Although we didn't have personal dealings, Rey's a super nice guy, super humble guy, sweet guy, as we would say. I would give him an A.
Now, I've written Planet Stasiak just because I just love the name, but Shawn Stasiak.
I've had conversations with Shawn post-business, like over the past few years and everything. He's a chiropractor, but we talked about different things. Once in a while, we'll touch base through, message or email, but I give him a B because we never hung out too much outside the business.
But these days, I mean, I've interviewed him, talked to him. He's a very nice chap.
He's a very nice. What I'm saying is he's super nice, but we're not super. I put Ray in there because Ray's had a reputation for being nothing but a nice guy. But if you want, we can bring Ray back down to B just because we weren't friends. So I don't want to. I want A to be people I've had a lot of personal. So he and Stasiak are B.
Okay. Scott Steiner. Did I ask you Scott Steiner in the other one, or am I going nuts here?
No, you didn't.
Okay, Scott Steiner, excuse me.
Another C. Outside of working with him, I never had any kind of dealings with Scott?
Bill DeMott.
Believe it or not, and people are going to get mad, especially people that worked in Deep South, an A. Because Bill and I were friends way back in ECW. And then I was in his wedding. Al Snow was in his wedding as well. And then we lost touch. And obviously it's a tragedy with his daughter, with the drunk driver. But he turned that into a positive with the foundation, doing really great work. But once in a while with Bill, see, Bill will, if I text him, hey, Bill, what's up? He'll be like, who is this? Like he loses his phone, I guess, like every year or whatever, or he just hates me every year. Who knows? There's a guy who does an appliance commercial here locally in Florida that has an eye patch. And he does like scratch and dent. Look, you buy now. Look, I have one eye or whatever. And I will send that commercial to Bill when it comes up, on TV or YouTube. And it'll be like, oh, Michael Manna. Like he hates that guy. I love it because he's so like that guy, like somehow just grates him. So that's what friends do. He's an A.
Spike Dudley.
I give Spike an A. I mean, yeah, when you're in ECW together and then we're in all these companies together, you get tight. Now, Spike and I speak once in a while. We catch up and, hey, how you doing? What are you up to? And then, of course, through people like Big Sal, Danny Doring, Roadkill, we all, if we don't talk directly to one another, hey, what's up with him? What's up with him? And ECW is still very much a fraternity. You're always going to put them in A. Well, with the way Raven feels about me, people love that tease, by the way. He might be a C or a D. I'm sure he thinks I'm a D right now.
Well, maybe you should have watched the video then. Not got that many more names. Tori Wilson.
I give her a C. I don't know her. Don't know her at all.
Same as Stacy Keibler then?
Yeah, pretty much. I had a little bit more dealings with Stacy, but nice enough, but not really anybody I was friendly with or friends.
Chris Kanyon.
Very nice guy. Never friends with him, but I'll put him at a B, like a high B, because another guy gone too soon. He's a super nice guy. As you can tell by his work, a super generous, giving guy. And I still think that chair shot was BS as well. The one Taker gave him.
Future episode?
Yeah.
Kevin Nash.
I have to put him at a B. Friendly with him when I'm around him, friendly with him when I'm communicating with him, but not friends. Still very much within the business. Friends have to be like if I had my, like when I text them and said, hey man, let's get a workout together. We started working out together once in a while or had more of a personal interaction outside of the business. It would go up into an A. I mean, he's incredibly charismatic and personal when he wants to, personable when he wants to be. So he could very easily be in an A, but I put him in a B.
Chavo Guerrero Jr.
I'd have to give him a C just because anytime Chavo and I have talked, very friendly, very personable, but never had enough conversations to put him in a B or an A.
Now, we haven't had any Ds yet. I don't think it's going to be with Just Incredible, but maybe with some names in this last line, I don't know, but Just Incredible.
PJ's a weird one. We were friends at one point. We did travel together in the new ECW. We did work out together from time to time when we were in that point. We both lived in Connecticut at one time. But during the Extreme Reunion show, that first show before Extreme Rising, that was the one where the night before Sabu went to the hospital. And PJ had taken the picture of Sabu in the chair in the hotel room. Then PJ was passed out in the locker room during the show, and Luke Hawx took a picture of PJ and put it on social media. Okay? So with that being said, PJ, up until that point, PJ and myself were pretty tight. And we worked the Hardcore Justice pay-per-view, mind you. Remember that. So this was after that. What happened was I did a shoot interview, the RF shoot interview I did, where I said, PJ, did such a disservice to the business. you couldn't even wait to get high or drunk or whatever till after the show. And he caused a little bit of a ruckus because he wanted to get paid, even though he couldn't perform. And he actually went out into the crowd and asked the fans for money. And I had said that was BS. And I said that was a complete, and after that, we hadn't had a conversation after that. And there was a rumor from another person within the ECW fraternity that PJ was angry with me because I stole his Wrestling 101 YouTube idea with the Wrestling Analysis channel. So I don't put him, I'll put him in a C because he's not the dude I remember before. And unfortunately, things that you consume sometimes can change personalities and change who you are. I've always been the same dude. I've made mistakes and I've tried to rectify those. I would love to reconcile with PJ if there is any heat, but I'm not going to lie about the fact when people asked me back in that shoot interview about what happened at the show, that it's just completely disrespectful to the fans, to the boys, and to the business. I don't think you should ever get messed up to any point. You should try to avoid those pitfalls. But if you can't stay clean until after your match, I mean, my God, that's on you.
The last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names. Ric Flair. This is someone who we've talked about quite a lot off air. I don't think we've ever really spoke about Flair on air, have we?
I've mentioned it. I mentioned it like as far as people, in the ring, I would work Ric Flair every day of the week. Outside the ring, I probably wouldn't have anything to do with them. It depends on which Ric Flair you're getting. Ric Flair could be a B or a D. No C, because it's not, you're not apathetic one way or the other. I've been around Rick, and Rick has treated me as though he was in the A category and we were closest friends. And then at the DoubleTree at one time where he, man, I don't even like to tell this story.
Well, you don't have to if you don't want to. You don't have to if you don't want to.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's whatever it is. We get it in the comments anyway, so maybe they agree with Rick. So, Rick has been an A to me, been my best buddy when we're working together, or it's a professional thing or something to where he's just in the right mood or nobody's around. How's that? That's what I'll say. On his own, much like the Scott Hall thing. But Rick is much worse around a group of people and if he's drinking. Case in point, TNA, Ric Flair, I didn't know this, but AJ Styles and I are coming back from eating. We used to play Madden, and I used to crush AJ 100% of the time. Do not listen to AJ. He's never won once. He sucks. He used to break the controller. His budget for controllers was probably $15,000 a year just playing me because I was so good at Madden. He sucks so bad. So there. But, there you go. But we would come back from eating at the IHOP or wherever else, go into the DoubleTree. You walk straight in, you make a left, the bar, the lounge is to the left, and then the elevators are straight on, a little bit down the way. We walk by, we're getting ready to go up there, and like I said before, for me to run the score up like 72-3, I would let him kick a field goal. So, yeah, that's the kind of guy I am. I'm an A when it comes to that. So we walk by, Flair is with Dixie and the whole group drinking. He screams to AJ, "Hey, AJ, hey, ditch that jobber and come in here and hang out with the big stars." And he's in there with Kazarian, Bobby Roode, the whole group against EV2, basically. You know what I mean? During that time, Fortune, I think they were called. And I'm looking, and AJ's like stopped, and he looked at me, and he's like, "Yeah, don't hang out with that effing jobber, that loser. Hang out with us. We're the stars. We aren't that." He said it a good 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, I'm looking down. I'm like, I'm not a tough guy. I'm really not a tough guy. But I'm going to knock this MFer out right now. Because I'm being laughed at. I'm being laughed at by the entire bar, including Dixie Carter. Nobody's like sheepishly going, "Ooh, that's enough." Maybe a couple people. And dude, you might think because of the light or because of my tan that I'm red right now. I was getting red. And AJ's like, hey, man, don't worry about it. He's just drunk or whatever. And I'm like, I'm going to knock this, And I go, I really shouldn't. I go, but I am dressed down. I feel about this big. And AJ was like, let's just go up and play Madden. And he admitted, he goes, so you can crush me because I know you're the best Madden player I've ever played. I forget the rest of it, but AJ, that's a different point. But it's true. That part is really true. I'm joking about that, but the part with Flair, I never felt so small and dressed down and offended and hurt and angry. And dude, I literally punched the wall in the hallway at the DoubleTree, which I've never, didn't punch a hole in it. I'm not quite that strong. So I could have punched Rick and he could have laughed at me and beat my ass and wiped the floor at me. But I've never been disrespected. And I've been disrespected a lot in the business. I've never been disrespected in public to that degree. And the next day, Rick comes up to me, hello, sir, how you doing? Like nothing ever happened. And I shook his hand and regretted it to not say, F you, you piece of what, and walk away. But you know what? When we did the cage match in Daytona Beach at Bound for Glory, and everything leading up to that, you notice in that match in the beginning with Kazarian, I was doing his strut, I was doing the hip jive right in his face, and he would shoot pissed off. So that's my Ric Flair story.
We'll give him a D for that.
He's
just for that one.
He's an absolute D with that. When in that case, Flair, okay, Mark Madden, anybody that's ever done a podcast with him, everybody's had dealing with him. Triple H, Shawn Michaels, he's turned on everybody. He's buried everybody, right? He's cut a promo on Shawn. You think you're a Christian, you know what I mean? If he doesn't get his way, he's buried Tony Khan, who gave him a job. He just here's the bridge and just throws a match.
Jeez,
so I'm
he did not deserve that job
small
with
potatoes. I'm nothing to him, and that's fine. But that's what he is.
Maybe you and he should go for a pizza sometime and bury the hatchet.
Well, we do have a great pizza place up in Gainesville that we're going to do a live review of. We still have that. It's within driving distance. I'm going to do it.
I wish we'd done that, you had done that earlier. I know we talked about that when we first started doing the show because it was like fresh off it, but that would have been so good if you'd gone like the next week. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to the pizza place and I'm going to finally drink one of those real American beers. We're going to kill two birds with one stone. What about his failing energy drink business?
Well, he's had one more failing energy drink than I had. So that...
He got some money out of it at least. Okay,
listen,
do you know what?
Here, let me close it off.
Okay.
Here's what I love about this show. For people to think this show is not about having an axe to grind. And I will say this, the beauty about what I've tried to do growing as a person, that I can separate Ric Flair, the talent, one of the greatest workers that will ever be in the wrestling business, with the man. I couldn't do that before. This show and doing this with you, it's kind of like therapy. I can differentiate these two people because there are two Ric Flairs that are morphing into one because he's now the character full time. So that's all I'll say.
Sort of. I don't know if I've done this on purpose. I don't think I did it on purpose. I did the last name on purpose, but there may be one more D coming up before whatever. But that being said, before we get to that, I'm going to scrub out Hulk Hogan because we've talked about Hulk Hogan a full episode with him. There's no need to talk more about him.
You know what? He is a B. He's a nice guy.
Yeah. Okay, we'll shove B with him. We're going to go with, just purely because it's alliance-based, and Test. Christian was also a turncoat and worked for the Alliance. So was Ivory, weirdly, among a couple of WWF people that didn't make any sense. But the most famous turncoat, as it was, who defected from the WWF to WCW, or the InVasion side, Test, Andrew Martin.
I give him a B. He's a B. He was a super nice guy. We were never friends. Like Dreamer and he were friends, tight, traveled. Test and I, he was really good to be around. Really fun to be around. Really nice guy. Great worker for the size. Great worker. Light as can be. Some of the stuff with the boot could be there, but man, a guy that was gone too soon, and he could have been a top guy perennially in the business for a long time. They gave him the Edge and Christian type of kid gloves to take care of him, but it never stuck with him like Edge and Christian. You notice that?
Yeah, do you know why in my mind? Is because he got mixed up with Triple H too soon and then just got gobbled up by him. Ever since then, I don't think he was ever seen as a top guy after that. The Invasion, the Alliance thing was basically where he was his last chance to sort of get up to that. And then, after with the ECW thing, I don't really think it worked out. Was he fired and then rehired by WWE at one point?
I think so.
Am I going crazy?
Yeah, he came back in the new ECW. I'm telling you what, heel test, especially heel test towards Stacy Keibler. He was a great heel, man. A great heel.
Now, I swear I didn't put this name in sort of at the end to get a D out of you, and because when you said, "Oh, Jamie Noble," and I was like, "What?" I either got the world's worst memory, which is entirely true, but anyway, Jamie Noble.
You'll be surprised. I'm going to give him a C.
Okay.
I'm not going to attach the kiss-ass politics or trying to step on my throat to stay in favor when he's trying to keep a job. That's separate from the personal type of thing with me. So I put him in a C because I never knew the guy. I never knew him, never really got to know him that well. We never even touched each other in the ring because he was a cruiserweight during that cruiserweight title era. So I give him a C.
And we never talked about the Jamie Noble story. I don't even know what the story is. We'll save that for a future episode.
Sure. Which you'll forget and I'll remember.
No, do you know what? I've started writing these down on my list of stuff of future episode topics, which I didn't do beforehand. The last one, Diamond Dallas Page.
I would give him a B.
Okay.
You know why? I mean, I was really tight with him at one point. I'm not anymore, but that doesn't negate the fact that he is a guy that gives of himself, that does help people, that started DDP Yoga to help others, yoga for regular guys, people that didn't really want to do yoga. He tried to find a demographic. He put his last amount of money into this. This doesn't make him a nice guy, but he's definitely somebody that had a mission statement to help other people. Obviously, want to monetize it. I do it with my fitness company, but he poured his last bit of money into this company, into DDP Yoga, and put everything into helping people. So that cannot be excluded for any kind of personal issues that we might have with each other. And he's definitely somebody, I mean, as you get older, he definitely was like, what are we even doing? Whatever. If I saw him tomorrow or saw him at a convention, I'd say hello, we would be cool, and that would be the end of it. Just like if I saw Bradshaw, it'd be the same amount of time. Cordial, hello, goodbye, I got a life to live. But I commend him. And he's an inspiration in a way to scale my fitness business, or anybody who has a fitness business, to scale within your niche and try to make that into something that potentially a beach body or somebody could buy for tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. He's got quite a big asset right there that he can, really make money off of.
Okay, that was the last name I'm going to give you, and that's the last of this show. So that was The Invasion. I know it's not like an all-encompassing thing about The Invasion itself. I mean, we could watch every single episode and, bore ourselves into a coma in that kind of thing. We're not going to do that. So that was The Invasion as Stevie Richards sees it, because you were sort of in for the beginning at the very... Were you even in for the beginning, really? No, you were sort of in MCW by that point, weren't you?
Not the very beginning, but when Kronik came in, I was on the show, but I was on my own island putting people over during that time.
On that basis, I'm going to shut the show down. I said to you beforehand, let's keep it down to 2 hours. Anyway, we're 2 hours 55 in. So, what can I say? We like to give the fans their money's worth, and this is a free show. Once again, are you doing the outro now?
I'll do the outro with the Patreon, but I'll plug your stuff first. James has 2, maybe 3 excellent books in the future. 2 books. He's giving me the 2. the two. But actually, you didn't turn it around because that's the Nigel McGuinness thing. If you turn it back, the backhanded thing is not what I want, too. Right there. So, two excellent books, one on The Rock, one on Owen Hart. Also, WSI recently, Eric Bischoff. Also, Maven interview coming very soon if it's not live as you're watching this. And many, many more to come. That's why we tried to make it 2 hours, but we've ruined that part. So it's extra.
Oh, I'll give you one more as well. Well, Jerry Lynn's going to be on fairly soon. And also part 2 with Scott Norton, which I'm looking forward to. That did a very, very good number the first time, so I'm looking forward to having him back.
Could I just, if you bring the graphic up real quick, Chris, Jerry Lynn, A++++ on the list. No, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. How's that?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. Should we do the Patreon?
Yeah, please. I mean, the outro was too hard last time. I'm reworking the Patreon outro. All right, patreon.com/Stevie Richards. Exclusive content. We just did the watch along, or you can call it the botch along, or the botch watch, whatever you want to call it. Kronik versus the Undertaker and Kane with a jet black hair wearing Stevie Richards in the corner of Kronik. Check that out. Pre and post show conversations. Also, I just talked about my new lighting setup. Everything behind the scenes throughout the week. Show notes. And like I said, dedicated watch-alongs or breakdowns for the producers of the Patreon. We appreciate that. I have Stevie Richards Fitness. Also, maybe this big flight yoke, I can't pick it up again. Also, maybe we're going to have a gaming channel up there. Please leave a comment below about that. Appreciate everybody at patreon.com/Stevie Richards. WSI, also Stevie Richards Fitness, and of course here at the Stevie Richards Show. Thank you so much. See you next week for episode 24. Most importantly, happy Thanksgiving and have a happy and safe holiday.